Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the October meeting of the Arts and Culture Commission. I'll suspend roll call for just another second as my colleague comes in. Roll call, please.
Commissioners Deaver.
Here.
Hovhanessian. Here. Grigorian.
Just arrived.
Lee.
Here.
Chairperson Kivanian.
Here.
The agenda for the October 18th meeting was posted on the bulletin board outside City Hall on October 12th, 2012. Item 2, consent items at A, approval of regular meeting minutes from August 16th, 2012.
Approval. Okay, is there a second?
Second.
I have one comment on this, please. I get organized a little. I'm sorry, which, this is the...
August 16th.
August 16th, right? I'm sorry, I don't have any much comment. I just want to congratulate, the changes. It is much better now and reflects a lot better on what we are doing.
Okay. So, roll call, please.
Commissioners Deaver.
Yes.
Hovhanessian.
Yes.
Grigorian.
Yes?
Lee.
Yes.
Chairperson Kivanian.
Yes.
At B, approval of regular meeting minutes from September 20th, 2012.
Commissioner Gregorian, did you have comments on
Now
this?
I have a comment in here, yes.
Go for it.
I just make the comment on what I remember. On item number 6, staff comments, I also requested that we put on agenda the item that we consider the awarding or certificates of appreciation or recognition to some of the artists and organizations. And I think that should have been reflected in there. It isn't. And also I expected that to be agendized today, and it isn't. So that comment, I think, should be noted and corrected, please.
Sure, we'll include that, and it's also included on my commission discussion items chart that I said that I would prepare to make sure that we would keep track of those items, and the artist recognition certificates will be discussed at our retreat as we're developing our work plans.
Okay. I actually didn't expect it to be discussed at the retreat. I thought it was going to be done today, but that's fine. Just that clarification. And I don't think I have any other comment in there. Just one second, please. No, I don't have that. And if there are no more comments, I move to approve the minutes as corrected, please.
And I second it.
Are there any further comments? Roll call, please.
Commissioners Deaver.
Abstain.
Hovhanessian.
Yes.
Grigorian.
Yes.
Lee.
Yes.
Chairperson Kivanian.
Yes. Next item, please.
Item 3, introductions and presentations. At A, library arts and culture events presented by Chuck White, Community Relations Manager.
Good afternoon, Chairperson Kivanian, members of the Commission, and staff members. And thanks on behalf of the Library Arts and Culture Department for giving me just a few minutes to give some updates about our events. You may recognize, let's see, is this supposed to, just goes, right? Volume. Supposed to go to the next slide. Let me tell you about the Brand 41. It's too bad. There's some nice pictures of certainly Commissioner Hovhanessian at the event. Oh, we're going. Okay. This is Brand 41. It's our annual Works on Paper that the Associates of Brand Library and Art Center put on. It ends this month, October 25th, and as you know, the Brand Library is undergoing some renovation, and so this event is at the Burbank Creative Arts Center. Let's see. Am I pushing the right button? Okay. Yeah, just bang right through those first 4 slides. They're just some of the people and visitors to the opening, which was on October 5th. Again, this finishes up on October 25. Next, I told you last month about a teen poster contest. You'll see one right up there, the Teardrop Vampire. That was one of the entries. It's now on display at our central library. She did her rendering was of an R.L. Stine book. You can guess it's about vampires and teenagers. And so for our calendar events, we have the Arts Tune-Up that I know you know about. It's co-sponsored with the LA County Arts Commission. That's for smallish arts groups, musicians, actors, theater troupes. Come to the library Saturday, October 27th. There's a real quick, high-energy session for small arts groups. It's going to be great. I know you'll be in the building that day, so you'll have to stop by. We have a number of great authors in November. Peter Dreyer is the professor of politics and the chair of the Urban and Environmental Policy Department at Occidental College, which is also having its 125th anniversary this year, so we're very happy to have Dr. Dreyer. His comment about his book, The 100 Greatest Americans of the 20th Century, is, "We all stand on the shoulders of earlier generations of radicals and reformers who challenged the status quo of their day. Now we take these ideas for granted because the radical ideas of one generation are often the common sense of the next." So that's coming up November 7th. The next day, I'm really, really excited about this author, Roger Capellian. His book is War Gods, East of Byzantium, Volume 1. It's a graphic novel. What's really fascinating about this gentleman, he's had 20 years in the digital effects industry in Hollywood. You will know these movies, Lord of the Rings, Alice in Wonderland, Charlie Wilson's War, Pirates of the Caribbean, X-Men, The Mummy, Flags of Our Fathers. I mean, these are iconic films. If you go to the next slide, you'll see a river with cliffs on both sides. Go to the next slide. That's what it was. So he's that guy. He's that guy who did those just startling effects and matte paintings for this film and a number of others. So he's coming on the 8th of November. And our One Book, One Glendale for younger readers. Again, it's an annual event. This one is for kids, teens. Wendelin Van Dranen is a very, very popular teen and young adult author. So not just children, but also into the teenage years, kind of the middle school area. That's a good way to do it. But the kids get a chance to meet this author, hear her, and they get to read the book and get to meet a live author. That's really neat. We always pack that. There's always close to 200 kids there. Next, the LA Opera Talks that we have every month. The next one is going to be on opera and the silver screen, particularly the silent film era. So we have a number of film clips that have to do with opera being used in silent movies. And he not just literally, but also as a metaphor for something else. Finally, we do have some holiday closures before your next meeting. Veterans Day, November 10, 11, and 12, that's the full weekend. But even though we're closed, you can look for us on the mobile app. Find it at glendalepubliclibrary.org, cut off there, or you can call our reference desk and we'll be happy to get you online. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions or comments?
Staff, do we have any flyers for the Arts Tune-Up? You can email it to us so we can send it to all our contacts.
Yes, I will email you the flyer that you can forward to your individual list. And as of today, there's actually 95 people signed up for the Arts Tune-Up. I think they usually get on average about 100 people, so they're actually nearing capacity. But I think if we have those extra 5 spaces left, but they're not going to turn anyone away at this point, so I will forward you the flyer.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Next item, please.
Item 4, oral communications.
I don't have any cards, so I'm guessing there's no one for oral communications. Next item.
Item 5, business agenda. At B, action items, review and approve temporary art display and community services and parks facilities policy.
Before you is staff is recommending that the commission review and approve the long-awaited policy for allowing temporary art displays in community services and parks facilities. Teresa Alexanian from Community Services and Parks is here, but I'll go through the policy with you briefly, and if you have any questions, she and I will be more than happy to answer your questions. As you recall, this policy is in response to local artists' requests to display artwork in public parks and community services and facilities, and staff has drafted this policy. Essentially, the policy provides guidelines for the submission, selection, exhibition, and insurance of artwork. I'll just quickly go through what these sections entail. The submission section states who can apply for the can submit a proposal. It's artists, art organizations, collectors, or any other artists. Acceptable media, generally two-dimensional art, with the exception of the Adams Square Mini Park gas station building, where a variety of types of visual art is accepted. The proposal requirements, which just require a proposal form, an artist statement, resume, images of the artwork that is proposed, as well as the guidelines. Essentially, the guidelines require that artwork that is suitable for all ages, since these are public facilities. The selection process entails a selection committee, the Art and Public Parks Committee, which consists of 2 staff members, one from Library, Arts and Culture, and then the Parks Facilities Manager, and 1 member of the city's Arts and Culture Commission, and that position can be appointed annually. This committee will then review the proposals based on the selection criteria that's listed in the policy. And there's also requirements for the committee to make a decision and notify all of the artists who have submitted a proposal. There's also an appeal process should an artist not agree with the decision that's made. There are some responsibilities of the exhibitor. They, of course, have to sign and comply with the rules outlined in the contract, and they can only install artwork that was approved by the committee, and they have to deliver the artwork to the facility and install it. The responsibility of community services and staff is being available during the installation of the artwork to monitor that installation, as well as creating and placing a sign identifying the artwork and the artist. Although the sale of artwork directly from in those spaces is prohibited, that's why we're going to make those place cards, so that all inquiries regarding the artwork will then be referred back to the artist, and then after the exhibition is over, then they can negotiate that sale. The policy also allows the director of either community services and parks or library, arts and culture to remove or deinstall an artwork, just in case if there were inconsistencies and the application that was submitted, but also cancel an exhibition just in case if the space is needed for something. The facilities available for display are included in as an exhibit. And then the last part is insurance, which is important. We will require a release of liability, but also require that either the exhibitor or the city provide a policy. And the costs associated with that are included in the fiscal impact. Essentially, the cost for installing will include a wall mounting and cable system, so that we install the system once, and so as each installation we install new artwork, we don't have to patch up any holes, and that's approximately a one-time cost of $3,000. The staffing cost to be there when the artwork is installed is approximately $1,000. The insurance, depending on number of artworks and number of spaces that are actually filled up, can cost between $5,000 and $15,000 a year, should the Arts and Culture Commission choose to incur that cost and purchase a policy. If we require the exhibitor to get the insurance, then that's anywhere between $100 to $300 for each artist to obtain the policy. We did put a maximum on the value of the artwork at $5,000. And that concludes my presentation. If you have questions, we're happy to answer them. But we do recommend that the commission that the commission approves the policy as presented. But decision about implementation and cost, we recommend that we discuss that at the retreat in the context of when we're developing the work plan, because there are other projects that we need to consider.
Any comments from my colleagues? Questions? Commissioner Deaver?
First, I just want to say thank you, because we have been anticipating this for a while, so we appreciate everyone putting our efforts forward and bringing this forward. I do have a number of questions. One is just a quick clarification. You had just mentioned that the cost to artists is anticipated to be between $100 and $300, but I think in the notes it says $500, so I just wanted to clarify that.
Yes, that's correct. Between $100 and $500.
Okay, thanks. Well, I do have a fair amount of comments. I'm just going to go through in as much of an orderly process as I can. Let's see. Just a clarification, just from my own understanding. This relates somewhat to the insurance portion of it. So policies just amongst in the city in general. So I know that we have like a loan policy, for instance, when people can loan their work to the city and we display. And I don't know which artworks we have on display at the city currently are loaned or are owned by the city, and how that plays differently with regard to insurance. But so is the policy and the costs that are anticipated consistent with how that's being implemented with any of the other art that's shown, like, for instance, outside of, I think, the community, over GWP, the Community Neighborhood Services, I think sometimes displays artwork there's there, or in the building itself, or in the libraries on the walls there, or in the council members' entryway, for instance. I'm just curious.
What I do know, in terms of the policy, the Michael Kalish art, the sculpture that was accepted, either the fire department or community services and parks is going to have to incur the cost of insuring that artwork, as well as the deductibles associated with it. So although someone's gifted us something, we still have to protect the city and then get that additional insurance. So that's what I do know, and I think maybe Mike can add on to that, or Cindy, or even Teresa if they have. But I do know that what is required, I mean, is pretty consistent. I mean, any contractors, professionals that work with the city are required to get insurance.
My question isn't whether they should or should not have insurance, because I think that's a fairly accepted procedure nationally. I mean, and I understand from the city's perspective. What I'm trying to understand is for myself, for artists that are out there and go, wow, it's $15,000 a year to cover, 3x5 spaces on walls for something that might, weigh 5 pounds or something, as opposed to like a huge sculpture that's a public art temporary installation that could cause significant damage if it fell on somebody or hurt the building. So what I'm trying to understand is how the estimate of what the cost would be for the commission or for artists, how that was arrived at.
And if I may add, just to minimize the discussion later, I had a very similar question. Aren't we insured generally in the city, and don't these works generally get covered by our self-insurance?
With discussions with our risk manager, depending on, even though we're self-insured, we have excess coverage as well. We have different lines of coverage above that. And if we had our risk manager here, he would be able to better explain, what is covered and what isn't covered under our policies. Even though we do have a basic self-insured, some of the other type of policies dictate what we can and cannot do, the excess coverages.
So how do we determine what part or what item is self-insured and what item we need additional coverage? And maybe it would be a good idea if our
Risk manager.
risk manager was here or will come here to explain those things to us.
Teresa might also have an explanation because there were several meetings between Teresa and the risk manager, especially our former risk manager.
Good afternoon, Chair Kevanian, members of the Commission. Teresa Alexanian with Community Services and Parks. Just wanted to clarify, my understanding from talking to our risk manager is the city is self-insured, but we do have a deductible. So the additional insurance that we require of the artist or the city to purchase in addition to the insurance that we already have for our facilities is to assure that we don't have to pay that deductible should we damage our facilities. So, for example, and I don't know if these numbers are exact, but we have a $100,000 deductible for the insurance that we have, let's say, on ARC. So if anything happens to the adult recreation center, the department would have, and the city would have to pay $100,000 as the deductible, and then the insurance company would cover the rest. So by putting up additional artwork, we're just ensuring that if we do damage the facilities, that there's another insurance company or some kind of coverage that's going to come in and help us pay for, so that the department doesn't have to pay that $100,000 out of pocket. And that's my understanding and interpretation of how the insurance policy works.
So practically speaking, what kind of damage do we expect, let's say a painting of 5 pounds weight, cause to any of our facilities?
Well, I'm sure that the damage that would be caused by a 15-pound painting that's hanging on the wall is not going to be as much as, let's say, you putting in or hanging heavy material at the Adams Square gas station where it could bring down the roof, or if by accident, you hit a hammer and you break the wall or whatever, and that needs to be patched up. So I'm sure that the damage may not be as much, but that someone still has to pay for that, and no one is really budgeted for that kind of stuff. So therefore, we would like to be able to have the additional insurance, so should that happen and the city has to pay for the replacement or the fixing the damage, that there will be some kind of coverage to be able to pay for that.
So instead of, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, it's
Go
okay.
ahead. So instead of, putting such a heavy burden of insurance cost and coverage on either us, the city, or a potential exhibitor, wouldn't it be wiser if we kind of limit either the weight or the size or the danger of any of this artwork?
Well, I think we already have a $5,000 maximum on the value of the art as far as the art coverage, but as far as weight, I don't know that we have limitations in the criteria for the weight, but that would be part of the criteria that the committee would look at and evaluate. So if you're looking at, a 200-pound artwork that's being proposed to hang at the ARC, and the committee feels like, that's too heavy, that might potentially damage the wall, the committee would not accept that proposal. So we're leaving that up to the committee and the judgment of the committee to evaluate that based on the criteria, because I believe that's one of the criteria that is listed in the policy.
And also, just to clarify, the new risk manager said even if an artwork is 5 pounds and somebody gets really close and decides to budge with it and it falls on them, it can cause potentially injury. So the city has to protect even in that instance. So we can look at weight limits. I think there's different cabling systems that can hang art up to, I think, 30 pounds. If we want to put some sort of a limit on that, we can, but we would still need to get the insurance coverage. And then the insurance, I think, cost is also linked in with the value. That's why we limited that value of the artwork to $5,000 to keep those costs down for the artist.
Right, and just as an example, I know we just did the July 4th exhibit at the Adams Square gas station. That installation cost the department about $300. to pay for the insurance. So depending on, the type of artwork, the material used, the value of the art, the insurance company will quote the artist what they would like for the artist to pay for the $1 million coverage that they'll have to buy. It's not necessarily going to be, 500 or 100. It's going to be based on what the insurance company quotes them, and there's no way for us to know, not knowing how many proposals we're going to have and the type of proposals we're going to have. There's really no way to put an exact cost other than an estimate going from $5,000 to $15,000.
But there is I actually have two questions. So one, there is the potential, though, of having an umbrella that covers all of these spaces, and regardless of what artists are putting in, assuming that we consider it safe, or the committee considers it safe, or if artists were individually purchasing insurance, liability insurance, then there would be a more specific cost to the artwork that they're putting up. Is that correct?
Right. There's, I believe, two options that's provided in the report, and one would be the city and arts and culture budget paying for an umbrella policy, which would cover all of the facilities, and it would be a flat amount, and it wouldn't be based on individual proposals. Of course, you'd still want to have your criteria to make sure you're not going to have an art that's going to damage the facility or, be dangerous to the people walking through the facilities. But it would be an umbrella policy that would cover all of the facilities, and maybe, at a later time, looking at combining that with the brand studio, the art center, or whatever other facilities we may decide to include if you do expand this policy. So we could look at that, and but the only thing with that is somebody has to pay for that policy, that umbrella policy. So it might be cheaper for the artist to do it individually versus the city buy an umbrella policy and divide the cost between the artists, because that would cost the artist more per artist if there's less artists participating.
And one thing you had mentioned, you said that the value of the art plays into the liability component, and that kind of confuses me because they're signing a waiver, or for the city, or providing a rider that the city's not liable, and they're requested. I'm a little unclear because I think the notes, the introduction says that it makes it sound like the cost includes the insurance of the artwork, but in the actual policies, it sounds like they're suggested that they purchase insurance to cover the value of their artwork should it be damaged, destroyed, disappear, whatever. But I took that wasn't necessary.
Yes, Chair Cavanian, Commissioners, distinguish between damage to the piece of artwork itself, which we're going to limit to the value of $5,000, and then the second component is public liability insurance, which is injury to a person who's viewing it or damage to the facility. So one is the first one, it has to do with damage to the artwork in case there was vandalism to it, which is property damage, casualty. The other one is public liability insurance.
So I don't know if an artist says, okay, I've been practicing art forever, but I'm not professional at it. My value really is $100. Mm-hmm. So I wouldn't want to see them having, if they go out for their individual policy, then it would be quoted on that. But if you're looking at an umbrella policy, it would be wrapped in, it would be higher. But to them, the cost of buying that insurance is more than the cost of the artwork, in which case it doesn't make any sense to buy the insurance. And so insisting that they do to cover the artwork doesn't actually make sense, because they could better about paying out of pocket the $100 of the value than the $300 for the insurance to cover the...
The insurance would not be covering their artwork because they're signing the liability waiver for the damage to the art. The insurance...
I thought I heard you say that it was. That's why I was confused.
I stand corrected. If I did, I apologize.
And I might have misheard, but
I don't think I said that, but if I did, I apologize.
I'm just trying to clarify.
No, right. The insurance won't cover the artwork. It's like, it's what Mike explained.
Right.
I have a question also, a confusion. Before any artwork is hung or it's put or kind of installed, don't we have specialists who would decide that if that ceiling would carry the weight or the walls or et cetera, before we get into the insurance or before getting into damaging anybody else? Isn't that going to happen? Isn't that part of it?
Well, that would be the committee. I mean, the committee is the one that's going to decide whether they approve or deny a proposal and whether it goes in. So it would be up to the committee. But let's say the committee doesn't realize that that artwork can potentially damage the facility. I think the insurance is never for we know it's going to happen, it's the in case it happens.
So then the next question would be the committee members, what are the qualifications expected? Because that's major. Knowing that I was involved with the situation, they need to have structural engineers or people who really would know how much weight that wall or that beam or whatever can carry. Have you decided who's going to be in the committee, or is it discussed?
The committee, the makeup of the committee was in the policy, in the draft proposed policy, and it includes the staff person from Library, Arts, and Culture. It includes a Parks Facilities Manager, and it includes one of the commissioners. So you guys would select somebody from your commission, and then it would be the staff from our Library, Arts, and Culture, and a Parks Services Manager, because it will be hung in the parks facilities.
Personally, I would have liked to see one more person there who, besides the art value, besides the city, not damaging the city and et cetera, a person who would really know if that piece of artwork hung or put or whatever is going to be making it safe.
Well, the facilities manager probably would be able to do that.
City manager?
The facilities manager.
Facilities manager, they are engineers or people in construction?
Well, it seems reasonable, if I might, it seems reasonable that you're going to be hanging cords, that you're going to be hanging, and it's all that's going to be put in place before this gets implemented. You're going to know how much that can
Majority
hold.
of the facilities, yes, other than the Adams Square gas station, all the other facilities will have.
I'm just, from my perspective, I mean, as long as when we provide things to the artists down the road, I mean, this is much more detail than we need for this, they will be provided, I assume, with, our cabling allows 30 pounds max, just so if you're putting a proposal, you might not get accepted if it's
That's
more than that.
probably would be in the call for artists, would be the limitations for that.
So the only concern really would be things that are outside the box of that. And I would think, as you say, with the facilities manager for the buildings and just common sense, we should be able to identify what seems to be inappropriate or not at a committee level, I would think. That would.
Sounds good.
On this insurance issue, you just mentioned that the Adams Square 4th of July exhibition cost us something like about $300, correct? And that exhibition went something like about 2 months?
Right, 2 months.
Okay. There were about 60 panels, or 54 panels, if I recall correctly. Each one was about something like about 24 inches by 36 inches. Most of them either cardboard or paper. And I don't understand. And locked and enclosed in the gas station. I don't even understand why we needed an insurance for $300 for that, while my car, which is a 2-ton vehicle, being driven usually at 100 miles per hour, and the way I treat it, a very dangerous weapon, that cost me less than the $300 that this facility cost with those paper panels. I understand a general concept of insurance and liability and, all the good stuff that we talk about, but somehow it seems that we are really trying to kill things by being so paranoid about things that potentially are almost non-occurring. And one of this is $300 for the insurance for 54 or 60 paper panels in an enclosed area.
If I was an insurance company and I understood how they quote their policies, I'd explain why the artwork costs more than your vehicle. So I apologize. I'm not sure why it costs more. But I think
my vehicle is worth a little more than 60 panels.
But I think the fact that we live in a litigious world, I think the city is just trying to protect our facilities and make sure that we're not going to have to incur additional liability. And I think that's just the role of the risk manager to assure to protect the city.
I understand that. I'm sure you understand that. I'm trying to, kind of take it a little lightly, and I don't hold it against you at all.
I understand, and I think this is one of the areas of this policy which has delayed the policy for so long, because we've tried to find all kinds of ways to go around it or through it, or somehow come up with a solution for it without having to bring it back, because we knew it was going to be a majority. The majority of the discussion was going to be around the insurance, but there's just we need it, and someone's got to pay for it, and I just don't know how else to.
That's fine. I understand the principle. All I'm trying to do is let's make sure that we don't get over paranoid and we don't overkill the opportunity to display great art from great artists just because it's so cost prohibitive. That's all I'm trying to, the point that I'm trying to make.
I make a suggestion that may help my colleagues and might I as well to understand it a little bit better, because I don't disagree that liability insurance is needed. I would agree that it seems overkill, but I understand it's a litigious state in particular. What would be helpful to me is to have maybe a quick breakdown that explains, in comparison to other cities in California who have a similar policy, if we can get a sense of kind of what their insurance requirements are, what their costs are for their program, if there's such a thing exists. The other thing is there's an organization called Fractured Atlas. Did anybody run across that at all?
We did provide that website to our risk manager, and he did take a look at that website, and that was one of the individual coverages. So if like they do go through Fractured Artists, Atlas, it would be the $100 to $500. I mean, it could very well be $150, but.
And what I was wondering in looking at, because I was looking at this last night, is not only as part of the RFP thing or RFQ for the artists, giving them some reasonable, because some artists, it's part of their work, they do this all the time, they get it, and others it's the first time, and those are the people we want to be able to support too, and particularly in this type of venue. So having those kinds of resources. But what I'm wondering is if there is a fiscal agent organization, like a foundation within the city or within the city parameters, or a nonprofit organization. I suppose the city probably could not, but I think there's a place where an organization can purchase an umbrella insurance for a group of artists or for something like that. I obviously didn't call them or anything, but it seemed to me that might be something worth exploring, just to see if that would help bring down costs at all. As an umbrella thing that we could then offer to the artists as part of the program sponsored by the Arts Commission. So anyways, for me, it would just be helpful to have a little bit more background about how we arrived at the numbers, so that we can, in good conscience, go out and tell the artists, we know it's a lot, it is just what it is, sorry, we really did our homework and we really checked it out.
I agree with my colleague.
And one additional point on the insurance, what I would really like to see is if we are asking the artists to provide us with insurance, then one of the requirements should be, and I don't think I found it in there, that the city should be named as co-insured. I think that should be a requirement as part of the agreement with the artists, because obviously that's the right thing to do.
Added insured. It's called added insured.
Well, co-insured.
Mike has the exact language for that.
Commission, it would be an additional insured.
An additional insured?
An additional named insured.
Okay,
Yes.
that's fine. Whatever.
And artists could use their own in renter's insurance. I assume, I could be wrong, but their renter's insurance policy, a home insurance policy, and do a rider for the coverage or something. I mean, I'm assuming that's the type of policy that they could look at as also an opportunity. Anyway, just other things to be part of that resource for artists if we have to go that avenue. I'm moving on from the insurance. You okay with that?
I think we discussed everything.
I think Commissioner Deaver has officially taken over the meeting.
Sorry.
She's going to run this item.
Holidays.
No, I'm kidding.
Okay.
Go for it.
I mean, they're all valid questions, and it gives some kind of credibility for whatever we do. So whenever we ask for those insurances, it's good to know that it is research-based and it's what is the common courtesy or common policy almost in most of the accepted or approved communities. So that would be good.
I know that the agencies I've talked to, they've all seemed to require a minimum of $1 million insurance coverage.
Some are more.
Who pays for it is different from city to city. Some cities pay for it themselves, and some pass it on to the artist. So the standard or the requirements for insurance are usually the same or very similar. It's just a matter of who pays for it.
And we could, just one more thought on that, we could also, as part of our planning process on the 27th, I think it is, when we're actually to be talking about how this is going to be funded, we could look at sponsorships and things like that, too. There might be a business in town that's willing to help sponsor and be the fiscal agent for an umbrella insurance, that kind of thing. So if we can have those kinds of notes available to us and we have that discussion, would be great, assuming we want to move forward with it on a as part of our program.
That's a very good idea, because we do need to have that sponsorship by different organizations in the community. It makes them involved, or they become part of the whole project and program, and it helps us as far as supporting the artists in the community. Sounds very good.
I did have some other comments. I'm going to move on for myself anyway, just trying to keep things organized in my own head. So under, I think, still in the policy, yeah, this is in the policy, I believe, yeah. So under who can apply, Glendale applicants are being given preference.
Priority, I would
Priority
say.
for display.
Precedence is a little harsh
Yeah.
word. I noticed that too, yeah.
Yeah, well, the word, I just now caught the word. My actually thought was in the actual application, as I recall, or the form that they fill out, I don't believe that is part of the information that we're requiring. So if we can have, whether it's a checkbox, are you a resident, do you work in Glendale, however we're defining a Glendale-based artist or exhibitor, I think would be a great little addition.
And I think we should change that precedence.
Yeah,
Word
if
doesn't
that's
sound
not
right.
part, wasn't sure if it was part of the summary for us or if it was part of the policy, but yeah, priority or preference. Preference, I think, is a typically legally kind of
Priority?
preference.
Okay.
That's what we use for
Coin
artist
toss.
housing. We do preferences. If you're not denying others, but you're providing a preference, it's almost like in a scoring kind of way. You can weight it that way. Under acceptable media, and this is just for my own clarification, I see two-dimensional, and what I don't want people is to get stuck into thinking, photography, just painting, because to me, you could do a tapestry, you could do something that is actually three-dimensional, but it's fairly flat.
Collage.
And a collage, something that has textured graphic. So if we can either provide an example of two-dimensional or something would be great, so we're not looking at something really static. I would love to see interactive types of pieces, more multimedia pieces.
Or some type of specification, maybe no more than 6 inches in depth, or 5 inches,
I don't want to get
something.
If you get too specific, I think that less specificity is actually gives the committee more flexibility and the artist more flexibility. But I mean, I agree with the direction you're thinking.
So do you think if we include like in parentheses, i.e., and do collage tapestry photography just as examples, that would be sufficient, or are you looking for us to change the way it's written instead of two-dimensional?
I don't know if there's another way of describing something other. You're just basically saying we don't want sculpture, we don't want things that can't hang on a wall, right?
Stick out a foot and someone's going to walk into it or something like that. So
Yeah.
we can clarify the two-dimensional visual art, and then in parentheses give a variety of options like we've done below for Adams Square, where we've put mixed media, mosaics, graphic arts, and we can add
think
additional language if
That
you'd
would
like.
be helpful. And to Chairperson Lee's comment, I think rather than saying, like, if we could say not like 5 inches, but just general language that says that doesn't, and I think it's even here, doesn't impose upon or inhibit the regular activities of that area or the safety of that area, that gives the committee the little more
Flexibility.
flexibility in deciding whether that is appropriate for that particular space or not.
Sure.
Because a quick way to view it is just looking at that. That jets out
Right.
about an inch or 2 inches, and certain parts are more outward than the others.
Collages, they go a little bit more than that, and we don't want to be too flat either, because I like to do collages myself. But, as it was described, it's good to say that it should not kind of disturb or disrupt whatever public walk. or
Hinder the
whatever.
regular use of
Hinder,
Yes.
yes.
areas.
And if we leave it at that, then the committee will have the flexibility if there's a space that could accommodate something that protrudes 6 or even 8 inches, we can then find the right location for it. And if we can't accommodate an artwork that would hinder the normal operations, then we just wouldn't be able to accept it unless it's for Adams Square.
Because we would like to make it more different, to bring as much, because you can even rope it. You have to find the right corner, and if need be, you could rope around it and kind of, protect both the audience and the artwork. But to limit the artwork is a little bit, I would feel
I think one of the, I'm glad that my colleague brought this up. This was the very same issue that I had also. And I think one of the ways of handling it is maybe we should have some kind of a proportion on the height, width, and the depth of it. And, we should say that the depth should not be a certain proportion less than the height or width. And in addition to that, then if an artwork is really small, but like a box-like, but very small size, then we are limiting those two. So probably we should leave this the way we described and give the committee kind of a more leeway and more discretion to decide on which one would be appropriate for a certain area. Although we are saying it should look kind of two-dimensional, but there is a chance that, if it's too wide and too high, then maybe a little depth wouldn't hurt overall. But again, let's just leave it to the committee to use their discretion.
From what I'm hearing from the commission, I just want to be able, unless anybody else has comments on this section, then I'll say what I've heard, and we'll include this in the policy, is that you want two-dimensional to be more flexible, so Teresa and I can add, in parentheses, mosaics, mixed media, crafts, animation, collages, and then we will also add, that artwork, this artwork should not hinder the normal activity or operations of the facility. The committee, when they're meeting, they will go out, look at the spaces, and see the size of each space to know what kind of artwork we can put in, and then we can then judge. The committee will be able to judge if something is small but protrudes 6 inches, if it's acceptable for that site. It might not work in site 8, but it will work at another site, and something might be very large but very flat. So we should, I think, just leave it flexible, and the committee, when they see the spaces, will know the right artwork for each space.
I would be very comfortable with that.
Yes, nicely put, very well done. Thank you.
Are there any, yes, Commissioner Gieber?
So I have another comment on the proposal form component on page 2 of our packet. This is where I just thought it would make sure that we have that Glendale-based confirmation. And then also, under number 3, resume or biography outlining the artist's career, including education, I suggest changing career to experience, because some artists, most artists make less than 10% of their income from their art, and career connotates money.
So you are changing that to the artist's experience?
That's my suggestion.
That's a good idea.
I can agree with that, absolutely.
Okay. So instead of career experience.
It could be career/experience or something of that sort, but
some of them actually may not even have careers.
Yeah, I don't want to scare anybody off.
Yeah, exactly.
We can change it to experience.
That's good.
But put both.
It's kind of like an insult if you don't have a career in something to, apply for a position in that. Like, for example, I would never attempt to even try to get a job at the city attorney's office because I'm not in that field. So if it said attorney's experience or attorney's career, I would completely,
legal background required.
Yeah, see, that's why legal background or practice and things. There's specific wording to this.
No, I mean, experience really covers it much better than
Right.
career. There are many people
yeah.
who are artists, but they would not like to consider that as a career. That's their experience.
So if it's a new artist with not much experience but a lot of talent, what do you do?
No, I mean, experience covers the whole thing.
Then the artwork will speak for itself.
Experience does the job.
Under artwork guidelines, this is just because this is one of my more nitpicky kinds of things as I was reading it. Therefore, the artwork must contain text or graphics or both that are suitable for all ages. I know what the intent of that is, but it reads to me like it assumes text or graphics, and an artwork may not be text or graphics. So if there's just a way of rephrasing that so that if the artwork itself is suitable for all ages, Frank. I don't know if we have to, and if you need to have extra about the text or graphics, but I just think it's too specific. if I may go on for myself, the selection committee, and this is actually to Commissioner Hovhanessian's point as well, we have the library, parks facility manager, and a member of the Arts and Cultural Commission, which I think is probably appropriate for the buildings in particular that are closed and run by the city itself, but things like Adams Hill installation, I think it'd be nice to have a community member involved on that panel if possible, and not, I don't want to make things more challenging for people, but at least having the option of having a community member involved in this once-a-year approval process, because there's a lot of ownership in a community like Adams Hill, either whether it's through the the neighborhood representation or others. Concerns?
The reason we kept it to an odd number is to avoid a tie. Should it come down to, 2 votes versus 2 votes, it's always easier, when you have an odd number. But we can include that. I mean, I don't think decisions like this are then, we don't really necessarily need a tiebreaker. We do want the community to embrace any artwork that is included in the site, so we can include something that for some of the installations we can include a community member, because I think there might be community members that are very, very much interested in participating in Maple Park. And I'll leave it to Mike if we can include language that the committee can choose to include one community member in the process or not.
What we might suggest is that they not be a voting member, but they give you input.
Okay.
Yeah, I was wondering that if it's not insulting to the community in that way. That was my only other concern, and I don't know the sensitivity of communities, but that would be an option. Or having if we're worried about the tiebreaker component, then having the director or somebody that is noted as the tiebreaker vote if it came to that. But
I think how you choose the member was another concern, is how do we select that one person from the community?
That was the point I was going to make.
So not only is it not just a tiebreaker, but also how do we determine, because I think that was part of the original draft, and then we figured it's going to be really difficult to try to limit, and it's one committee annually, and it's a once-a-year call for artists, and they're going to evaluate all facilities. So if we had a separate committee for each facility, maybe we can include one for the Adams Hill residents or area, but they'll be evaluating all of the proposals for all of the facilities. So to include somebody from the Adams Hill community for all the other locations might upset some community member from another location, and so that was one of the other reasons why we tried to limit or not include the community.
Let me ask this, just to complicate things more. What if, in a neighborhood-specific type of venue, there was an opportunity, whether at a Arts and Cultural Commission preceding the committee's meeting, to come in, or preceding the RFQ going out and letting us know if there are certain types of artwork they would like to see installed there, for instance. Like, we would like something really vibrant, we want something, we just love photography, whatever it is, and just invite them to come to the commission, and we can relay those types of concerns or thematic interests to the committee?
I mean, I can coordinate with Teresa to see if it is something for each parks facilities supervisor, if every year, let's say if we choose to do the call for artists in January and December, they try and just get community members who use that facility to just give their input, and we can see if that's something that the staff can and has the time that they will. So then at least if the residents or the community members at Maple Park say we want photography, at least we can relay that message over to the committee. But we can check and see if that's something that's feasible for the park staff to do, because they're the ones that are at the facility and would be able to have that contact with community members.
Or even if it's an agenda item for us that goes out as a public notice.
I was going to suggest is when we do the call for artists, if it's okay with Library, Arts and Culture and the Commission, if we could just advertise it here that there's a call for artists, and the artists are going to be submitting proposals come, let's say, December, the committee is going to evaluate it. If the community at certain facilities has any input in the type of art they'd like to see, to come to commission and voice their opinion, and then the committee could then take that into consideration in evaluating the proposals. I think that would take the burden off the staff, and then you'd hear it firsthand versus, I told the manager there this, but he or she told you this, so
You
I
know,
think
that
that
is
would...
being already done, because let's say with the Riverwalk project,
Right?
they had people from that area in the committee. They were invited. I don't know how did John invite them, but they were invited. They were representing the area. They discussed what they would like to see, which would bring in the tradition of their whatever that area was. And it was wonderful because you could see how they had that ownership and their ideas was highly respected. So we were there from the commission. There were people from the Parks and Rec, but there were people from that community as well. So they were part of the committee. So as you said, it could be announced, and they could come and either talk here, or they could come and just join the committee, or come and present their ideas, and then the committee would work on whatever was given. So it is being done, and I think the tradition could be continued.
I think the best option would be for them to come to commission and give you that, because the Riverwalk was specific to that park and that location, so it was easier to pick or select a few community members. But because these proposals are all going to come in as a group and it's going to be for multiple facilities, it's going to be hard to, if you include, a member from each, there's, I think,
Each
6
section?
or 7 facilities, you're going to have 6 or 7 community members, and I think the bigger the group, the harder it is going to be to make a decision. So I think, in my opinion, the best option would be for them to share their opinion at the commission meeting, and for whoever from the commission is on the committee to take that back to the committee.
That sounds procedurally kind of more of a shortcut. But if
there's-
I was a community member, let's say special to a local area that there was going to be this exhibition, I would have liked to have that back and forth conversation with the artists and with city people to see where we get there. But, I mean, this is also okay if they come to the commission and the commissioner would take the idea to the committee. That's
But I
fine
think
either
that-
way.
Maybe after the first year of implementing the program or policy, you can think of other ways to do that, but
Initially.
maybe initially that might be a start.
That kind of sounds scary to me, because what I don't want to happen is to have 40 artists who have applied for this potentially with oral communication forms to come in on one particular day and present all of their stuff.
It won't
So-
happen.
Well, it wouldn't be the artist, right? It would be the community. I don't know
Well,
that you guys...
community member. Well, it doesn't really even matter, because once we've opened it up to one, we can't close out the artist from coming in saying, you guys should pick my work because it's nicer and it belongs in this area. So
You can do that now, though, so...
I
yeah,
think,
but they can't because this hasn't been implemented yet. So let's.
Well, it'd be before the RFP went out, though, so we wouldn't get into like the specific artworks. It'd be like kind of more thematic of what the neighborhood or what the community would like.
We
to
can
see.
just have a discussion item, promote
That's-
that community residents that we're implementing this program. If you have any comments or if you have any feedback about the type of artwork you'd like to see, please come and let us know. And then we will take everyone's comments. After we issue the RFP, the commissioner that is elected to serve on that committee can relay those comments. Again, what was done for Riverwalk and Maple Park, those are permanent installations in those facilities, so it's different than something that's going to be temporary and that's going to change potentially once or twice a year. So we can do that, so we make sure that the community members' voice is heard and that it's
I just
been
wanted
relayed to the
just to
artists.
clarify that, Commissioner Gregorian.
I am all for the community member involvement in the whole process. The concern, as was mentioned earlier, was how do we select that community member? And also, there was a point raised in here which I respectfully disagree, which is that community member will not be a voting member. I think if somebody is putting time and volunteering and doing all those work, then they should really have a say in the selection of artwork and art pieces also. And the best way, if we are really worried about ties, then as hard as it looks, instead of 4, maybe we should have 5 members, either 2 commissioners or 3 city staff members, or somebody who would be able to break that tie. So these are just, minor things that we can work on. Community member involvement is a really good idea. However, let's not forget, this is a kind of a work in progress. We are kind of experimenting with this, and I'm sure after the first year, we will come back and evaluate it and see the pitfalls, the problems, the negatives and pros and cons of it, and hopefully we will fine-tune it and refine it for next years, and we will resolve all these issues. I think the most important thing is that we have taken that major step of doing this, and it is very positive. It's really good news for everybody, and let's just move forward with this. And all the other minor issues we will tune up when the right time comes.
I agree with you.
Okay, Commissioner Lee.
From what I'm hearing, I think the only solution to make this work, you would have to set up a committee for each location, because then you can have your specific community member for each. Because if you pick one community member, like I said, again, you're taking 6 or 7 locations, that community member might only be for Adams Square location. And then they're going to voice their opinion about the other 6 locations, and then the other 6 locations, people in that community, might not want to see what that community member is saying.
Actually, we have to keep in mind this is temporary. This is not permanent. It's going to change every couple of months. So if somebody doesn't see what they like, they're going to come in to our commission meeting and say, hey, wait a minute, I don't like that, and can you do more of this? So then this is going to solve the problem. So that, I don't think we need to worry about, are we going to have a special, because actually if you look at it, all 6 of these could potentially have some kind of issue with, a community member wants to be involved. So I kind of want to avoid that as much as possible.
Correct.
So
and that's why my real recommendation would be, what was suggested is we leave it open to the public when the time comes for the RFP to make all the submittals. Anybody who has any recommendations, then they put it to the committee. Because anything else other than that, it's gonna be too technical to try to find somebody to add them on, and then that person would have to represent the whole city instead of one section.
You know what I really would like to feel and think, and this is absolutely the way that I feel and think, is that we are all members of the Glendale community. In whatever section of town that we live, we might have some tribal feelings about it, but the overall thing is we are members of the Glendale community with all its good and bad and with all its diverse cultures and religions and colors and everything else. And I wouldn't really think that somebody who lives in the Rossmoyne area like myself shouldn't really care about Adams Hills area like somebody else, or vice versa. So when I say a member of the community, I really mean the Glendale community. I don't mean, the Chinese community or Adams Hills community or the young professionals community or whatever else that is. So that's the way I see it. I think a member of the community should be part of this and should really care about not only their own little tribal fiefdom, but overall on Glendale.
So what I want to get a feel of is what my other colleagues think about this issue, because for myself, I'm going to kind of go against Commissioner Gregorian a little bit. I'm kind of for keeping this the way it is, the way it's listed here.
I agree with that. I like the idea of making sure that the public is aware that this is happening, so they can come and provide information, because some people will really care and some people won't. Because I think, to your point, that it's a temporary changing exhibition, it's not a permanent installation in the community, I feel, and particularly for this first year, I'm perfectly comfortable with your suggestion.
And I'm doing this purely for staff purposes, so they can get a clear idea of what the commission as a whole.
I think that would be consistent with staff's recommendation. Also, we don't want to limit the artist to only submit a proposal for one location. Again, it's the committee's job to look at everything as a whole and then to select the right artwork. So if there are no additional comments on the selection committee, I would say that recommend that we continue to move forward, because we have a couple of more items, and I want to make sure that we don't have to rush through the other items.
And I have more comments.
Sure, that's fine. I just wanted to make sure that there were no additional comments.
I had a feeling about that, Commissioner Deaver.
I'm trying to blow through these. Okay. So, and this might just be, this, you can tell me if this would be more of an internal thing or if it needs to be in the policy. But in the selection criteria, we have this listing, which I think is great. There, I think, again, we can add the Glendale-based artist as one of those bullet points. But I would feel more comfortable if, at least as an internal policy for the selection committee, that there's some sort of scoring component or weighted component to that, so that when people are questioned about it, and particularly if we get a flood of applicants, and, hopefully, and you get more than there's room for in a year, if we're only doing it twice a year, and we want to be able to say why we selected this person for this time, this person for that time, and why somebody else didn't.
Like a rubric, kind of?
Yeah, so that we can have some policy for who's in the waiting list of, what comes up next.
To Mr. Grant's credit, he did recommend that to us, and we thought that we would make that internal after the policy was implemented versus having it in the policy.
Do we need to have anything that lets them know that there will be a scored, fair selection?
Internally, we were looking at, for example, when you were scoring the Bob Hope Airport students' artwork, they had a chart where I think they assigned, not only they have a verbal description, but they assign points to it as well. So yes, definitely the commission or the committee can have some sort of a description and corresponding point system that could be assigned to it.
And I had one question on one of the bullet points: historical prominence or significance of the artist's artwork. It's just for a little more of a discussion. It just kind of jumped out as me as a little bit odd, since we're not the historic committee, we're commission, we're arts commission, and so I wasn't sure why the historical component was one of our selection criteria. I just don't care one way or another. It just sort of jumped out at me.
It doesn't necessarily have to be, it doesn't have to meet all the criteria. It was just one of the items that we thought, if it somehow represents Glendale history, that maybe it would be given more of a, not necessarily more of a preference, but it would be one of the items that we would look at. So it doesn't necessarily mean that it has to meet all the criteria in order for it to be approved or denied. It was just one of the criteria that would be used in evaluating it. So if everything else was equal and it represented Glendale, then maybe that would be chosen versus the other one.
I think maybe it just needs more clarity, because then I'm assuming that the rest of that, the significance of the artist doesn't have to do with, well, it's a nationally known artist. It has more to do with their historical significance to Glendale or the artwork. This doesn't really go together for me for some reason, and the significance of the artist made me nervous, again, back to the point of scaring off artists who aren't significant, perhaps.
Like, I'm not a significant artist. That's why I'm here.
My confusion is the fact that since this is temporary art, it's different. If it's an installation that is going to stay forever in the city of Glendale, like a statue or something, I understand that, the historical value or connection to the background of the city is kind of important. But if it is just a short display, I don't see even that should be an item in the criteria. Because limiting artists when they are doing a display of artwork, to me, does not make any, especially for short-term work.
Would you, I'm hearing two different things, I guess, to appease your concern, Commissioner Deaver. So would you think maybe historical provenance of the artist or artwork, or historical, or do you want to just eliminate that?
I would strike it out.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes.
I would strike that entirely.
For short-term art,
It would be historical relevance rather than prominence? I'm sorry, I'm getting really nitpicky now.
Yeah.
But
Or we can just delete it, and that could be one of the judging criteria. Some of these things, when we issue the RFP, we have to let the artist know specifically how the committee's going to be selecting and evaluating, and that's where we can get a little bit more specific. So we can save some of the specificity for later.
okay, great.
And Commissioner Deaver will work with you entirely on all of that.
Whether you like it or not. Just a quick thing, and this might be for when we're sending out notices to artists about this is under decisions and notification, that they have a right to resubmit. So if they're denied on one artwork, that they would have the right to resubmit that at some other time, just so they understand that. I'm curious, too, whether there is at least down the road, if maybe we can talk about it, maybe it doesn't need to be part of this, but the opportunities for receptions if an artist has more than one artwork up, or there's like an area where there's like 5 pieces and the artists want to have like an informal little reception, there's some process by which that can be organized. I don't know if it needs to be in here specifically, but just something to be thinking about.
Sure. I think
Usually,
it's not in there. I
didn't see
thought
it.
there was something in there which stated that it would be at their own cost.
I don't think we did.
I don't think I read that, but
Oh, I think
Maybe.
maybe we deleted it and thought we would discuss it at a later time.
Commissioner Deaver, are you talking about the number
know
of
we had-
artwork and the insurance, the amounts, or is just what is the number of artwork could be displayed each time?
Neither. The opportunity for artists to have a reception for their work.
Right. I
So
think
for example,
we-
if I have an artwork that's hung there, hey, can I use the facility for a couple hours and I'm going to display more of my artwork around it?
That's not really what I was suggesting, but it was really just if I have an artwork up and I want to invite my clients or my mom or whomever to come see it in a more official way.
I know we had it for the student art display one, and I thought it was in here as well, which stated something to the effect of artists may hold a reception at their own cost, so as long as they pay for the facility rental and pay for the staffing required, they would be able to have the reception unless, it's during, if there's any cost to the department for use of the facility, they'd have to pay for that cost, so.
That would,
wouldn't it be nice if we are going to do this, and if there are several artworks displayed in one area, as a general policy, if we do have a kind of a mini reception or opening night, so to speak. This artwork is going to be there based on this proposal, 6 to 12 months. And maybe, just serve some refreshments, and the artists probably will be happy to do that, or maybe they might have a sponsor to do that. But overall, that not only will give them encouragement, but also it will encourage the community to participate in that kind of an opening night, because it's quite nice to go there and meet each other and mingle and the network and come up with some ideas and discussion.
I think we agree with that. The issue again, it comes down to money. So if
think that's a topic for our retreat.
If we do decide to hold, at the beginning installation, we have an opening night. You can go to any of the facilities. Again, it would be after hours. If there are refreshments, we have to worry about the staffing costs to keep the facility open. So if that is something that the commission would like to discuss when we're developing our work plan, we can look into it and see exactly what the cost would be for a 3-hour reception. I'll work with Teresa to get those costs just so you understand what that means.
Yes, I think I would like to see that. And, I think it is important for us to, make the decisions based on, all this correct information. And maybe in the retreat we can, when we are discussing budgets, we can also have some kind of either budgets allocated to this or ask the artists to cover, whatever the cost is. I don't expect the cost of some refreshments, cookies, and some drinks be that cost prohibitive unless we again ask for $10 million insurances and things like that. So, it just, I think overall it's a nice gesture to have that kind of a reception.
Okay, so basically, if it's for all of them, the beginning, opening night is one thing, we could talk about it, and if it is specifically an artist wants to have it for 3 hours, I do find that if they pay from their own pocket, because they can bring people who are going to evaluate their work or to buy their work and et cetera, so that is going to be kind of beneficial if we go that way. So we'll discuss all of the financial
So just so
we
you're
might,
clear
we
on
might
what
be
the-
we might be entering into a very dangerous territory. If we do a opening night based on our plans, that's a different story. But if an artist wants to have his or her own circle of friends and clients to come in and wants to do an individual one, then that's totally separate, different. It has nothing to do with us. And then it is, again, the cost of insurance, cost of coverage, cost of staff. That's a totally different thing.
That's what I was saying. So if an artist wants to do that specifically for 2 or 3 hours, then there should be a different negotiation.
But that's a totally different policy
Totally
that we should have, yes.
But what has to do with the commission is that I do believe that the first opening night, and even the committee could do the fundraiser for raising the money or whatever is decided. Those details could be taken care of when we talk at the retreat.
So staff will provide you with information if the commission sponsors one opening night at each of the facilities once a year for 3 hours for a Friday evening, and we'll use that scenario.
Fair enough.
Just so everyone's clear. Okay.
I think that's a great idea, because then there would be a rotation between all the different, or among all the different facilities that we have, so community would go to all the different facilities as well. I want our community to see, people are not very familiar with all the little things and beautiful things that this city has. It's a good idea.
Commissioner Deaver.
Can we have a notation in the agreement and/or in the policies that while the city reserves the right to photograph and use that for marketing and such is great, this is under installation, but that just a notation that the work remains the ownership of the artist, just so we have that in writing.
Sorry, I didn't get that. Say it again,
Yeah, I
please.
didn't understand it.
There should be a note in the agreement and the policies that while the city does reserve the right to photograph or have photographed all works of art for promotional and record-keeping purposes, I just want a notation that the artwork remains the property of the artist, the intellectual rights and such of that, just for their protection.
That's a very good idea, excellent idea.
Under responsibility of the exhibitor, the hanging of artworks, just for clarification, it sounds to me like it doesn't necessarily have to be in a traditional frame and with plexiglass. It could be something that's not framed. The way this reads, to me, it kind of insinuated, again, that sort of static, it's going to be in a frame, it's going to have plexiglass, it's a photographic element, as opposed to if it's proper. I think in here it does say that if it's,
What section are you in? I'm sorry.
Sorry, yeah, I was just trying to speak ahead.
Responsibility of the exhibitor.
Under C, exhibition
Page 4.
guidelines, page 4, one of the indented, first paragraph indented.
How about we change "and" to "or"? Because some artworks would require framing, some have to be assembled properly or wired. So I'll just change "and" to "or".
Perfect.
Very good. Excellent.
I'm sorry, I just lost this for a little while.
Page 4.
No, I understand, but so you are discussing the artwork must be framed with plexiglass, right? Is that what you're discussing?
My concern was that I didn't want to insinuate that things had to be framed with plexiglass or be framed. They just needed to be appropriate for hanging, and I just wanted to make sure that the way it was termed reflected that intent.
Yes, I had the very same point, so I agree with you, yes. I don't think we should really limit them to, a specific thing, because, they are free to express the way they want.
No, the only concern would be that if it is a kind of a painting or artwork that has to have glass or plexiglass, with glass it's a little bit more dangerous in case of shattering.
That's what we're,
plexiglass is
I was
for
just going to
protection.
explain that the reason we had that in there is because we didn't want glass just in case it falls and
That's
breaks
correct.
and a patron's walking underneath the artwork. So it wasn't intended to say that if it doesn't require glass, that doesn't have to be, but if it does, then it be plexiglass versus actual
But the way it is worded, it says it must be framed, and I think that's totally unacceptable and actually confusing.
We can reword that.
Yes.
And then to make it so that should an artwork require framing, that it be done with plexiglass.
The last bullet point under responsibility of exhibitor, only artwork approved by the committee will be exhibited. I think there's an appeal process by which the director can override, and so that's just a technicality.
Sorry, I didn't follow.
The last bullet point, only artwork approved by the committee will be exhibited. I believe there's thank you. This is just for maybe discussion down the road, but I totally get the 6 months to a maximum of 12 months. Can we, because the policy I expect has to come back for approval if we make any changes, like at council or here, I don't know the exact process for it, but is there a way of making that more flexible so that each RFQ we expect it'll be between 6 months and 12 months, but that we reserve the right to change that if down the road we have an opportunity, say quarterly, to do something like in one of the installations because we actually have more money for it or more staff time or whatever, just so we don't have to go back and revisit the policy if there is the opportunity to change over exhibits more often. I'm thinking, again, about this gas station because there's so much light in there that some things that might be there for 6 to 12 months, obviously part of the committee's consideration, but could fade over time. But if it's something that they could do quarterly and it doesn't cost more and we decide we want to do that in year 2 or 3, I don't want to have to come back and change the policy to allow that. That makes sense.
Fair enough.
Does that work?
Okay.
So if we
Or
said
any-
the commission will approve time frame on an annual basis, that do it.
Sounds good.
Is that under exhibit time limits, or is that where you guys are looking?
Actually, if you are discussing the time limits, I had a issue with this 6 to 12 months. Sometimes for exhibitions and displays, 6 months might be a little too long. And I was wondering if my colleagues would like to consider, let's say, 3 or 4 months minimum, and maybe twice a year display in a certain area, just as an option. I'm not saying that it should be that way all the time, but some artwork, when they stay there for a while, they become kind of tired and old and somewhat not interesting anymore. So 3 to either I would really like, to keep this, but also have the option of having an exhibition 3 to 4 months, and maybe twice a year with different artwork.
I think that's what we were just saying, that we'll write it so it's more flexible, because I think the 6 to 12 months was because of the costs associated with implementing this initially, but that we have the flexibility by saying that we can change it on an annual basis, that we can make that change.
Any other questions, comments?
There's a removal, deinstallation of artwork. I think there is a difference between the actual contract and the policy with regard to the city having a right. There's a bullet points on page 5 for the way that the city has the right to remove the artwork, but I think in the signed contract that if they have a unilateral right that's written in there, it's just I think a small inconsistency.
Yes, the contracts were just prepared as drafts. These are for
Okay, so
other
that'll get
policies,
changed.
so these will change. We
Okay.
just provided you this drafts just so you would know what it would potentially look like. So we'll keep an eye out for that.
And the circumstances by which an exhibitor may remove, like through an appeal process type of thing, if they need to remove it for some personal reason, would be great to have in there. I think then we get into the insurance. So thank you for bearing with me on those.
Commissioner Gregorian?
Well, I'm glad that my colleague, Commissioner Dever, discussed all these issues. That reduced a lot of my comments.
And that's difficult.
And relieved
to do.
everybody.
It's not easy to.
On the dais and in the community. However, I still have some points to make. The facilities that we are discussing are, great. I'm just curious, although I know that brand galleries are going through renovation and they are not available, but hopefully eventually they will become available. And I was wondering why the brand galleries were left out of this whole thing.
Brand galleries are different than these kind of exhibit spaces because they are programmed by library staff. So it wouldn't come under the purview of the commission. Now, there are spaces in the libraries that perhaps we could add to this at a later date, and we did discuss that among staff, but we wanted to get this out to you as quickly as possible before we added more.
A question on that. So if that were to be added to, can that just happen as a procedural process? It doesn't have to come back into approval at any level if that gets changed down the road?
Policy, so you have to come back to.
That's why I'm wondering if there's, again, more flexibility that, if that is indeed the
Any
case.
additional location?
Yeah, Mr. Grant is saying, no, we would have to come back.
Yeah, it's a policy.
One thing, just FYI, one thing that we talked about today with the architects on Central Library is that we are going to create some exhibit space at Central Library, and that would be a perfect example of something that could be included in this kind of policy.
So is it possible then to, for instance, not include the exhibit, but to say it would be approved on an annual basis by the commission with those exhibits? So that way, I just don't want to have to go back for approval every year if we want to add something mid-year. Oh, they're back with, can we add this space? Does that create a liability issue?
Can we state in the policy that it would be as listed in the call for artists, maybe? And just send that list out annually with the call for artists?
Okay.
Well, we could look at that where, and check with our risk manager just to make sure that if it's not listed in the policy, but the policy says as presented in the call for artists, and then we could list the facilities available annually when the call for artists goes out.
I just like to keep it as flexible as possible so we don't have to keep coming back.
My question is that, okay, when, with Central Library having a nice, I hope, gallery for art exhibition, why wouldn't there be the choice or a recommendation from the Commission both for the Brand Gallery, Art Gallery, and the future Central Library's Art Gallery? I know that staff programs them, and they do a wonderful job, and it's a very big job because they have to process a lot of work. But meanwhile, these are going to be the two major, most beautiful art exhibition centers in the city of Glendale. So somehow I do see, or it might have some problems there, I don't, somehow in my mind, I do see that we should have some kind of, commission should have some kind of a recommendation rights, or if need be, some advisement in that direction, because to exclude the two major, I'm including already the Central Library as a gallery too, that as far as an art exhibition areas. So I know that procedurally there will be some other restrictions, but as a recommendation that those two areas would be included as facilities that could be used for the arts.
And, I mean, that certainly can be discussed at a later date, but I think there is a difference between a professional gallery and a community gallery, and what we're talking about in this policy is a community gallery.
Just a community gallery. Okay. So in the future, we'll discuss for the other two, because that is major too. In the past, we have had situations, and there were art exhibitions that were kind of required for the community, and we had to either wait too long or to go through different processes. So those could be also used for some of the community as well, if possible. That could be subject to discussion later on.
So my understanding is, from this discussion, that the Central Library exhibition space, the future exhibition potential space, would be also included in those facilities. Am I correct?
Yeah, but that's at the time that we finish our renovation and
Of
our
course,
construction.
yes. Okay.
Would that be also
beca-
by staff, or would that be part of a location that, generally speaking, we could use under this direction?
I mean, that too would be open to discussion at a later date, but I could see that very easily falling within this policy.
Okay, thank you. That's okay. That's one of the questions I had. And on these facilities, for instance, it says area A, B, whatever, area 1, 2, 4 by 6, 4 by 4. What are these numbers referring to? You say, let's say on page 1, Maple Park Community Center, A, area 1, 4 by 6. What does 4 by 6 refer to?
It's 4 foot by 6 foot wall space that's available that can accommodate artwork.
So with this is all the space that we might have for this? So on what do we expect to have a 4 feet by 6 feet wall? I mean, so basically we might be able to display just 1 or 2 artwork or something? Is that a thing?
Well,
Yes,
we
a
could,
proposal
or
for-
if it's much smaller artworks, we could accommodate. So
Yes, of course, but-
these spaces, we will let the artists know the size of the spaces so that they know if they're preparing something specifically for the space, then they can do something that would fit. But that is the space that's available.
That's fine. And so the question was, now that I'm clear about this, I'm concerned about this. Let's say in Pacific Community Center, all we have is a 3 by 3 wall. And in Adult Recreation Center, we have 4 walls of 4 by 4. So, one thing I really would like to see is to review these spaces and see how we can maximize the spaces allowable. Because otherwise, I don't really know what we can. Yes, we can do some very small artwork, but what can we display on a 3 by 3 wall where it will stand out and not be kind of overwhelmed by the surrounding? That's probably not much. And the same in Spar Heights Community Center, 3 by 5, the same at everywhere else. So basically what I would really like to see, number one, if we can revise these spaces and make them much more display friendly and display appropriate. And also the second question is, have we examined the lighting on this? And, is there an appropriate lighting, or is just a blank wall and we thought, wow, great, let's put something in there without considering the other elements?
Well, I can tell you that the lighting is not going to be gallery-style lighting because the facilities were not built for art display, which is one of the concerns that we've had. And in order to install that, obviously it would be related to cost again. It's not impossible, but there has to be a budget set for that. So these were the walls that I believe Ms. Marashian and I, at the time we walked the facilities, we talked to the supervisors, and we try to gauge which areas and which wall space that is currently available we could use without either, the youth running through Pacific Community Center, knocking it over or hitting it with something. So we try to take into consideration where...
And then just to clarify, all of the spaces are lit, so it's not in a dark corner.
Right.
I've checked with the supervisors on site. They're lit either by natural light, overhead light, fluorescent lighting. Again, it's not the gallery-style lighting, but they are well-lit locations, and these are the best possible spaces. And I think Ms. Marashian and Ms. Alexanian took into consideration the environment, but also maximizing the gallery space. But we could go back and look at it and see if things have changed.
I'm trying to stay as calmly as I can because somehow I lost it. With all of these rules and regulations which is needed, we are talking about in each facility 3x4, 3x5, 3x6, 4x5, doesn't matter. It's just one artist's work altogether if you talk about. Maybe two works from one artist or one work from each two artists. And to have all of this, maybe if we would have a display in all of our facilities, we'll spread up all the artists' works and kind of we'll look at it. I can see that. But to have only an exhibition on a wall in a facility for 3x4 is completely speechless. I don't know.
Actually, I was kind of waiting for this to come up, and we were talking about doing artist receptions and stuff. It's
Exactly.
for one work.
Exactly.
That's why. But it was just funny the order in which these items are discussed.
So maybe we should wait till the Central Library's art gallery opens up, and then Brand and etc. So we'll worry about talking about exhibitions. And
I think we'd be more than happy to walk through the facilities with the commissioners if you guys are willing to walk through and help us identify if there is better usage or if you see space that's available that can be used that maybe we didn't identify. Other than that, I mean, this is what staff has been able to identify as the available space for art display. So
I kind of have a different take on this. I think we should approve
the rules.
No. What we have in front of us currently.
And then worry about the space.
With all the changes.
Well, yeah, of course, with all the changes. But and if we do find other locations and venues and things, we can all clump them together, and 6 months down the road or whatever, we can have this come back up on the agenda because it's a policy, and then we can make those changes. So I don't think we should.
Mr. Chair, with all due respect, Pacific Community Center is a huge center. Has gym, has facilities, has community rooms, meeting rooms, everything. And in that huge community center, we have a wall of 3x3.
I agree with you. I'm not saying that the spaces, that's why I was even laughing or not laughing, but I was smiling when you guys were talking about doing a reception, because in my mind I'm thinking, what are they going to hang in a 4 foot by 4 foot? I mean, that is really tiny. It is. So I completely agree with you.
What can you display on a 3x3 space where at least it will give some kind of a background? Right. It's impossible. It's not going to happen.
Yeah, but you know what, Commissioner, you're right. But something he said which convinced me is that as far as bylaws and rules and regulations into how this needs to be done, we should approve this. Then later on, because yes, the facilities and all that spoken does not kind of work with this, but we'll worry about the locations later on.
Right, and this is the hard stuff. Let's get done with the hard stuff. Finding locations is easy. I mean, I'm looking around and I see empty walls around me, so it's not difficult to find locations. I mean, I would love to have the art displayed here too. Yeah, yes.
My understanding of this, and obviously I came in midstream, was that this was a starting point, and yes, the wall space is very limited, but that it was eventually going to be expanded not only to the libraries, but also to other facilities in the city. And so that's going to, and we talked about actually when I came on board with the commission about holding off on this until we could expand our spaces, but we really felt that we needed to move forward and really get this policy in place. But I mean my vision for this is that it will be expanded throughout the city organization. We just have to spend some time as staff really looking to see what is feasible. And Commissioner Gregorian, in terms of Pacific Park, one of the issues there is a lot of that space is programmed by the schools, so often our hands are tied in terms of what we can do in that building, the gym being an example. And you know, I agree. I mean, we all agree. This is very limited, but it's a start. And I'm very committed to expanding it to all the departments in the city.
I kind of want to limit the rest of the comments, but Commissioner Deaver, you've been waiting.
I just want to say that I agree with these last comments. We've been waiting for this forever. I also agree that the spaces are very limited, but I skipped over that for the very fact that let's move this forward, knowing that there is a broader vision down the road for that. And we get this on the books, then we have some more leeway to work with it.
Okay, so I think at this point, I think we're ready to entertain a motion.
I haven't finished my comments.
Well, you can still make a motion and then continue with your comments.
Let me finish the comments first.
Okay.
On the temporary art display in first page, acceptable media, there was a point made earlier that sculptures were not accepted, and I don't even understand why. But if the display area that we have is a wall, then obviously we cannot have sculptures. That's understandable. But, we have floor space also, and we can put some sculptures on some nice stands. And, if an artist is a sculptor, I think, although sculpture is not really my form of art, and I hardly understand most of it, but, I think it is a very great form of art, and I don't think we should preclude it. I think we should include sculptures also as part of it.
Depending on the space, we should add maybe something.
Of course, but again, floor space.
The exception at Adams Square Mini Park that can accommodate sculptures. I think including sculptures in some of the other facilities was probably a liability issue that was mentioned to me by the new risk manager. Is at least if something's on the wall, again, it doesn't hinder the normal activities, but we can review that. If that's something that the commission wants, we can see if it would impact the cost of insurance or if there's any other liability issues. But Adams Square Mini Park can accommodate sculptures and other forms of media on the site.
I think we should explore all of those ideas, and before coming to a final, final thought of it not being appropriate, I don't think we should exclude sculptures. I think we should include sculptures.
I may also add, just for you to keep in mind, the other thing that the supervisors at the facilities brought to our attention is you have youth that are running through the facilities, or you have seniors with wheelchairs or walking sticks, and so the concern with having a sculpture, standalone sculpture, is that there's that risk of somebody running into it, throwing a ball at it if it's in the gymnasium, or the seniors hitting it as they're walking by. So that's kind of where the increase in liability comes in. So I'm not saying that we shouldn't again reevaluate it, but I just wanted you to please keep that in mind.
I understand the pitfalls of it, I understand the limitations of it, but these are things that we can work out. If we have a huge floor space, we can limit, we can have ropes, we can do whatever we have to do, but just because of these imaginary concerns, to limit a certain art form from being displayed, I'm kind of not very, I'm not for it.
If this is, we are setting the ground rules or policies needed, which we do, we need to include that one, because this means regardless of the locations that we have 3x4 and et cetera, which is something really I have to think about it. But if this is only for our specific areas of 3x4s in 4 walls in the city, that I can understand. But if this is going to be the policy that we are going to work on, and with the future expansions and et cetera, then we need to include that we could include sculptures based on the location and the space allocated. So that way, if there is an exhibition hall that has the space, like Brand or Future Central Library, we could have sculpture, because that would be an area only for that use. And if it's going to be for a 3x4 wall of a corner of somewhere, then we don't. So it identifies that we do not exclude sculpture, yet we would kind of have something there, addendum, which says, depending on the location of exhibition.
Commissioner Lee?
I'm sorry.
My best recommendation is that sounds like a phase 2 part of what we're doing, because if you, right now at hand, we only have a handful of locations that we're talking about. And the policy, like I said again, the policies are all working policies. It's not something that's set in stone. We can't change it, by act of God to make a change. I think those things are next steps to follow, because then when you have an actual location that you can do that. Right now, you don't even have a location that you can do that, and then you're trying to foresee any possibilities of everything that can be possible. Now, and I think that will restrict ourselves in the sense of stopping what we're doing now and then putting everything else. By the time we finish with a comprehensive package that will include everything I think we're talking another 3 months down the line, 6 months down the line, because, not just sculptures. Why don't we do water features? Why don't we do other type of things? That's why I said there's a lot of possibilities.
I know, but
I think we need
to exclude sculpture initially, there are too many different mediums, but to exclude sculpture from when you are making a policy initially, to me, it's like a crime. I really do believe that. Because if we only talk about 4 walls, and 4 walls forever, 4x3, that's another story. But if we are making a policy that is going to be stayed there, and we are going to work on it, and it's going to expand nonetheless, there needs to be that part, because sculpture is a major part of art. So to have that art, depending on the area and the location, then kind of it would give a leeway for future decisions, but you're not excluding sculpture, because to me it's almost an insult to art if we don't have sculpture there. I really am very adamant about it.
And again, the committee will decide based on the limitations that we have, but we cannot in advance. And if the committee thinks that the sculpture is too big, too, bulky, to whatever it is, or inappropriate in any way, the committee will decide not to display it. But we shouldn't really stop it from being submitted.
Given the concerns that were brought up by the managers on site at the centers, as well as risk management, the acceptable media that's listed here, it's not supposed to be all-encompassing for every potential facility. It's just for the ones that we've listed. So if the commission would like, we made some changes for the 2-dimensional art, but when we come back to add additional facilities that can accommodate a variety of different art, at that point we can add in. Right now we're saying the 2-dimensional art, which can which can have some depth to it, but given the current space. So when we come back to add additional facilities, library facilities, perhaps City Hall, that can accommodate all of that other art, then we could include it. Because the acceptable media right now that's listed is based on the existing facilities, and I would recommend to avoid confusion among artists. If many of them submit sculptures, but we can't accommodate sculptures in a lot of these facilities, then I think then that would be an issue for artists, given the spaces we can't accommodate them, minus the Adams Square Park.
No, I disagree for it.
One second. Commissioner Deaver?
I make a suggestion. I think we had sort of tabled the potential for having the exhibit be considered on an annual basis and referred to in here, dependent on what our risk management says. So if we can also, if that is okayed, to be able to take the exhibit out of the policy component, then perhaps we can have the more generalized language that relates to, on an annual basis, the potential exhibit space and that relates to the potential media. Does that make sense? If it's approved, because we want this to get approved by risk management, and if we put all this other stuff in, they're going to say we can't. I'm assuming because of the cost associated, because it becomes unknown. So trying to separate the policy, so the policy is somewhat generalized, if we can, meaning that on an annual basis we can look at adding new places that might allow for different types of artwork, and then on an annual basis being able to update that, if that is okay by risk management, and we can approve the policy in that format.
May I also say that this particular policy is very specific to parks. And as Teresa is saying, it's a very active space. And sculpture is more appropriate in a more passive space where kids aren't throwing balls around and the activity. So when we come back in a year and, we have to decide how many other facilities we want to look for, then we rename this and then we add different media at that point.
Question. You're right, and I was looking, since this is specific to the parks and whatever, so I can understand that. It's a very active area. But as far as anything that City of Glendale would be involved, or our department, your department would be involved with any kind of art exhibitions, which, as you said, we'll discuss in the future, do we need to make another set of policies also, or do you already have in place policies for those locations? Because from what I see so far, I'm not seeing any kind of, personally, that there is much could be done. I mean, these policies are wonderful, but as far as art display, I do not see it as a big kind of a future thing that's happening around in our city. But I'm looking more forward to locations, possible locations as Central Library and Brand and others that, I'm sure your department will also facilitate for different events. So then, hopefully, then we should have another policy made generally, or do we have a policy? Does city have a policy?
I mean, we have policies directly related to brand galleries as a professional gallery. We don't have policies related to exhibiting things at our other libraries.
Okay.
We don't have anything in place related to that, but this would be very relevant to that.
For the parks.
Yeah.
Now, in the future that you said you're looking that there's going to be an exhibition hall at the Central Library, an art gallery, would it be something kind of like Brand that we could depend on really professionally to exhibit something and to talk about it instead of going, let's say, to Burbank? If Brand cannot accommodate, then we would have Central Library.
No, unfortunately, we wouldn't be able to find enough space to create a gallery. It would be more, what we looked at today, and, everything is a concept right now. What we looked at today is a hallway that would give us more wall space to do exhibits. But it would not be a professional gallery like Brand or the Creative Arts Center. Unfortunately, we just don't have the space for that.
And hopefully,
love it if we did, but
I know. Then hopefully we should look into buying or having a center for art that we could keep it and we could display it, and artists can come and use it besides Brand because, well,
we've also talked about the landscaping around the library being a great opportunity for sculpture. And using some of the architectural elements, such as the elevator, as an architectural element, very artistic, where we could display something about Glendale history or a whole variety of things. So we have all sorts of ideas of how to incorporate art into the project, but not specifically an enclosed gallery space. I'm very excited about that possibility.
We need to, I want to caution my colleagues that we do have a time limit, kind of. But so I would like to get some kind of some kind of motion
I'll try to
going
be
here.
as brief as I can, and I don't have many more points left, unless my colleagues would discuss some of these points. So
Probably going to happen.
Okay. So when we go to page 2 of that temporary art display there are a couple of things. One is on item number 4, it says the digital image, whatever. On the second line, on the bullet point, it says title the city with applicant's first and last name. I think that might not be enough. You might need to add the proposal dates and the exhibition space, because obviously, for future years, if this goes into the archives, we will know when and what it was for. And then on number 5, it says if an individual is proposing to exhibit multiple works by various artists, authorization by individual artists should be submitted. That is something that may not be possible or practical, and we should add if available. And the reason is, you said that in the past, earlier in this document, we said a collector might be able to also display some art. Me as a collector, I know that I have some work that the artists have passed away a long time ago. There is no way for me to be able to get authorization by those artists. And, I think that is something that overall it might be a good idea, but it doesn't apply to all the artwork. So if available, should be something added to there.
Right of ownership?
Or right of ownership, which again, sometimes it is possible to prove, sometimes it's not. And then maybe you would like to see some kind of a documents of authenticity in there, as item number 6 maybe. And also maybe, we discussed this to length, but maybe item 7 should be also proof of insurance for that, if that necessary. So in parts of the documents, we might add this too. And when I go on for the second part of artwork guidelines, I understand all of this and it's good, but there are a couple of things that I think might be used to accuse us of censorship. And I want to definitely avoid that. Some of these are points where it says California Penal Code section this and that, that's fine. We obviously have to abide by the law. But when on the first bullet point, it says any material that is likely to incite or produce an imminent lawless act. That is something, although I understand the philosophy behind it, but I'm not quite sure how a commissioner, a staff member, and a parks facility managers can determine what will happen in the future. And if we somehow limit that, that is a good excuse for some people to accuse of us of censorship, and the same applies to the second bullet point, and the same applies to the following one, which is false, fraudulent, or defamatory. The rest, I can live with it.
If I may, Commissioner Gregorian, these phrases are actually words used by the U.S. Supreme Court in various court decisions about what does not receive First Amendment protection. So these are items, actually phrases that's been used in court decisions which say that these type of things don't receive First Amendment protection under the law.
Well, I understand that, and obviously I'm not in a position to go against anything that the Supreme Court has said. My question is, how do we determine if a certain artwork will incite or produce imminent lawless act? How we are not even qualified to take that. We are not sociologists. We are not. How would we know that?
Well, I do believe that when something is displayed, the wording is based on the judicial system. But as far as the visuals that are there, when something is displayed in some property that belongs to the city of Glendale, it's not a private exhibition. I do believe that there should be some limitations, regardless of it's considered being biased or being whatever words you use there, because we cannot display all kinds of things. If it is done in my backyard in an art gallery or whatever, that's different, but any locations, specifically the ones you see there, it needs to be protected.
Commissioner Gregorian, certainly we can help you, assist you, and I would be willing to, assist the Commission in giving some examples of what the Court has said to assist you in giving you some guidance under these points. For example, the first one that came to mind that's well known is like if you're in a theater and somebody yells fire when there's no fire, that creates a riot where everybody's trying to exit the theater. Certainly I can assist the Commission in giving some sort of examples that come under each of these bullet points so that you have a better notion of what has been talked about.
Well, that's fine. I would really like to have those, and I really appreciate those assistance. My concern, I'm sure you understand, is not that somebody has a right to yell fire in a movie theater. However, we have had this in the past. Several years ago, when we were doing the first Man's Inhumanity 2 Man, there was an art piece which was a huge point of contention. I'm sure everybody in this room will remember that. And after a lot of discussion, after a lot of soul searching and all kinds of other issues that we went through, that art piece was displayed and nothing happened. So what I'm trying to say is, again, it's much better for us to be more active and proactive and do the right thing than be accused of either breaking the law or censoring people's minds. That's basically my concern. And I don't want to ever be accused of censoring any artwork.
Absolutely. And certainly, I and our office can work with the commission, again, giving examples that, would fall under each of these categories.
That's great. I will really appreciate that. I have just one, probably a last point or a couple of two. On page 4, when it says installation, I think the 1, 2, 3, 4th paragraph, it says display will include a sign stating name of the artist, artwork title, and artist contact. I think we should add the artwork detail, which is size and media also, because that is also important. If we are going to display any artwork, I think the size and the media that it was created is important. And on the very bottom of that page, it says artist contact information. I'm not quite sure if all artists would like to have their phone number publicly displayed for 6 months on a public place, but it's up to them to decide. And I think that would conclude my comments.
I think the rest of us are done. So we need to come up with a decision here. So I need to hear a motion from one of my colleagues. Oh, yes.
Since there are a lot of changes to be made, I'm not sure, is it appropriate to approve it today or wait until we come back with the changes?
The corrections.
Yeah, we will. Then we will make a motion to direct the staff to rewrite this, revise it, and come back for a lot more discussion on this.
So do I need to hear a motion for that?
Let's see when you're going on a trip.
Was that making a motion?
Yes, I'm making a motion to direct the staff to revise and come back to us.
Okay.
And when do you think you can come back? Shall we say next month? Shall we put a time limit on this?
Yes.
Is 1 month enough for you guys to work on?
Yeah, it's not
I
much.
think so. I think so, yes.
Okay, so
Okay.
please bring
so
it back next
roll
month.
call, please.
What-
Oh,
Seconded.
I was just going to ask if you would like us to bring the risk manager to answer some of the insurance questions.
That will be wonderful. That will be wonderful.
If that would be the case, then could they finalize it and bring it next time? Or, do all the corrections? Or should we wait for the...
same thing that we were supposed to vote on this time, which was just to approve it. So they're going to give us a final version of that. Okay, roll call, please.
Commissioners Deaver,
Yes.
Derovanessian.
Yes.
Gregorian,
Yes.
Lee,
Yes.
Chairperson Kavanian.
Yes. Next item, please.
At C, reports information only. 1, status update on Diamond Awards.
Quick update, we have a total of 28 nominations. The commission approved the master list of potential panelists in March. Commissioners Gregorian and Terhovenessian are currently reviewing the list to make a final selection on the panel, and when that is selected, we will come back to you.
Okay.
So do we discuss it at the retreat further on, some of the details, because there were issues that you and I were talking about?
We can discuss the Diamond Awards as part of the work plan at the
Yes.
retreat, should it come up.
We need to.
Okay. Sorry, but we have to move on. Next item, please.
At 2, status report on implementation of arts-related programs called for by the Downtown Specific Plan.
I'm going to call Alan Loomis from Community Development to give a brief update on the arts policies in the DSP. This was requested by a couple of commissioners.
Thank you. Commissioner Kavayan, you've been mentioning that we're under a time constraint. How much time do I have with your discussion?
Half a minute.
As long as you'd like.
Okay.
We're under the time constraint.
Actually, the next commission meeting starts at 5, but we better
Right.
try to...
We have usually until about 4:15, 4:20, so you're fine. You got about 20 minutes.
Okay, I have 20 slides. Usually I give myself an hour or a minute for every slide, so I'll fill up all the time. You won't have room for any discussion.
Even better. We don't want this.
The downtown-specific plan was adopted at the end of 2006, and interesting as it relates to your discussion about the policies, it has been amended 7 times. So despite the fact that it is considered the penultimate document about the planning and development of our downtown, we have revised it, tweaked it on an annual basis. So it's in planning, we tend to view these kind of policy documents as living things that we would revise fairly regularly. So maybe that will inform your discussion.
Yvonne will have to switch the slides for
if we
just
could go
have next.
This is the vision statement that begins the downtown specific plan. If we could go next, I want to highlight, it'll pop up, the word cultural on the bottom right is part of the vision statement, cultural arts facilities. We sort of intend that fairly broadly, the word cultural. And in fact, this word was added during the advisory committee and the review process when we developed the specific plan. We had a approximately 35 member advisory committee that worked through the final draft of the specific plan for the better part of the summer of 2006. Commissioner Gregorian will remember that very well since he was on that committee. You were as well? I was looking at the name. I didn't see your name. Maybe we left you out on that. But I know you were on a commission when we adopted the plan. So the word cultural was added in at the request of the advisory committee that worked on this plan. And if I could go to the next slide, part of trying to develop the ultimate plan for downtown, one of the things that was left out in the plan and the timing to try and simply get something done as a platform for action was any sort of implementation related to arts programming. And so when we adopted the plan, there are 17 follow-up actions and programs that are part of the plan, and these two, number 11, number 14, specifically related to arts programming or arts functions or arts uses. So these were added in. I believe one of them was actually, number 14, came as a part of the advisory committee and from the Arts Commission, a feeling that the downtown needed to have an arts district. There simply wasn't in the time frame to get something done. We couldn't dive into what that meant. It would have delayed the plan probably by a good year and a half. So we said we'll come back and amend the plan later with that particular piece. So if we can move forward. Next. Under number 11, to establish a program or funding to implement, mechanism to implement public artwork. This was done, as you can see, in December 2010 when the council adopted the urban art guidelines and established the urban art fund that is funded when developers choose to pay in lieu fees rather than do public art on site. And I know the commission is very familiar with that discussion. So from a planning and zoning standpoint, we said we would set up a mechanism by which you could do and implement public art. We didn't say how that was going to be done or under what standards or what kind of art, per se. But from a planning and zoning standpoint, we feel like we fulfilled this objective. And it's now, of course, the responsibility of the Arts Commission and the Library and Arts and Culture Department to determine how that money would be spent and what kind of artwork we'd be looking at. But if I could go to the next slide. One of the things we called out for was the idea of using public utility infrastructure as a canvas for public art. So you can see these examples. The one on the left is a poem and a kind of neat little sort of relief on a manhole cover. That one's from outside of Denver. The other one is some poetry or some form of text on the tree grates that surround the street trees. That one's, I believe, from Australia. And the one I'm particularly interested in, I actually haven't seen it yet, in the lower right, is some sort of poetry, sort of free speech kind of statements that are put on some of the utility boxes you see all over the streets. In this case, this one's outside in the Playhouse district of Pasadena, so it's just outside. And I believe that actually is funded through some form of public art money in Pasadena. So these are possible ideas that we thought the Urban Art Fund could be contributing towards when we wrote that in the specific plan. Next. The part that actually we've spent the most amount of time on and the bulk of this presentation will be about is the Arts District. As you can see, program number 14 called for designating an arts district in the downtown with appropriate economic or planning incentives to encourage arts uses. This is really, there's kind of, you could say, like 4 different programs or zoning amendments that we've done over the past, since starting in 2009, that implement that. So I want to go through some of those. So we'll go for the next slide, please. In 2009, the council amended the specific plan to include an incentive for new museums or art galleries or exhibit spaces. The specific plan includes a variety of things that allow developers to ask for height and density bonuses. It includes things like affordable housing, additional public open space. In fact, the council last week or 2 weeks ago approved 2 new projects that asked for the public open space benefit. Hotels, historic preservation, and there was a number of other topics. At the time the plan was adopted, there was no mention of art. In 2009, there is now an incentive for developers to include art space in their building. What does that incentive entail? Basically, if you commit to doing an art gallery in your new building, you're allowed an additional floor of development, and basically the square footage of that art space is essentially free. It doesn't count towards your density as measured by how much square foot you're putting on the property or the FAR. The obligation, though, on the part of the developer is they do have to submit a business plan showing that, in fact, this gallery is going to be functional for at least 5 years. The council, on a case-by-case basis, can sort of add other stipulations. We did that so that somebody doesn't walk in as a big developer and say, hey, I'd like an extra floor of density because I'm going to put an art gallery in, we give it away, and then 3 months later they're like, this gallery thing isn't working out, I'm just going to turn it into a Starbucks. So we want them to agree and submit a business plan that the gallery be functional for at least 5 years. Now, the thing about no parking requirement applies to the conversion of existing spaces. If you have an existing space within the downtown, you convert it to arts uses, you're not required to add any more parking than you're already provided. So from a planning and zoning standpoint, the kind of incentives that we give for arts uses or galleries is about as generous as they get. I think historic preservation is probably the only thing other use that gets this kind of zoning incentive. Thus far, we haven't seen any developers take advantage of this incentive since it was adopted in the beginning of 2009. Next, please. In terms of establishing an arts district, this was subject to a great deal of conversation at the council level and the redevelopment agency at the end of 2009, and through 2010, and ultimately resulted in the Maryland Art and Entertainment District, or Maryland Off-Broadway as we sometimes call it. This is generally, as you can see, focused on Maryland Avenue between Wilson and Harvard, crossing Broadway, with the Alex Theater and the Central Library serving as the 2 anchors. When we were developing the downtown specific plan, the advisory committee had said we need an arts district. This was one of the possible locations that was suggested. Orange Street was also suggested, and when we took this to the council, they debated the possibility of Mid-Brand directly in front of the Alex Theater as being another possible place we would try and focus art and entertainment uses. In the end, we collectively decided that Maryland was the appropriate location. If we can go next. A couple of reasons for that. As I said, it's 2 blocks long, and while the front door of the Alex Theater and the Central Library don't quite face Maryland, they are the sort of cultural anchors at either end, much like a big shopping mall needs to have department stores at either end. We said an arts district ought to have cultural anchors at either end. We already had the cultural anchors existing. Next. The Alex Theater, of course, very well known in the community. And next, the Central Library clearly is sort of playing a role as a kind of cultural anchor, particularly with the events and readings and cultural opportunities that take place at the auditorium. And of course, you have to love the picture of Charles Phoenix and his groovy 1950s photos of Southern California. The other reason we looked at Maryland is because it's a beautiful streetscape. It's paved in brick and granite and fountains, which fortunately fountains don't operate. These beautiful passageways that connect at the Brand Boulevard, great lighting. It has really great urban design and kind of architectural attributes. But next. But at the time we started looking at this at the beginning of the recession, it was also a very beleaguered place. As you well know, if these photographs, if you look here at all these businesses that are part of that streetscape, not a single one of them is in operation anymore. And in fact, if you look at Borders, Circuit Cities, Linen and things, we're talking about businesses that are not in Glendale, they're not on the planet anymore. So this was a place that, from an economic development standpoint, had been driven by the sort of big box retailing that was popular in the 90s, the advent of the recession and the kind of contraction of the retail industry. This environment simply wasn't working anymore. So next. So everything that's highlighted in yellow was a vacancy on this corridor. So one of the things we said is this is a real opportunity. There's lots of space available for arts and new art and entertainment uses. And in fact, if you think about the retail picture, pretty much every retailer that wants to be in Glendale is already here, most of them in the Gallery or the Americana or on Mid-Brand. So as we looked around, we're like, we simply can't fill up this space with more retailers because all the retailers that want to be in Glendale for the most part are already here, but we have a lot of vacancies that we could reprogram in an imaginative way. And they're all focused on Maryland Avenue. Plus we have 2 big parking structures, plus the library and the Alex Theater. So it was a great opportunity to sort of really rethink what Maryland Avenue is about. So we developed a series of different kind of discrete actions. Some of them were planning and zoning changes. Some of them are economic development incentives. Some of them are simply ideas, and other ones are involved in the expenditure of public money on infrastructure projects. So here's kind of, I'm going to go through these 7 different points as kind of a set of ideas that, as we developed this idea of this art and entertainment district with the council, all of these sort of intertwined in our mind. So this part of the presentation is actually from presentations that we've done at various conferences promoting this idea, and also used for various awards programs. We won an APA, a planning award from the local LA chapter for this project. Next. Now, when we talk about an arts district, the way the council phrased this was an art and entertainment district. So it wasn't simply art galleries. It was also the entertainment side. Now, the council at the time was also very interested in not simply movie theater kind of entertainment or bars and nightclubs, but sort of stage theater, jazz clubs, comedy clubs, broadly defined both art and entertainment. So you can see there's stage theater, outdoor movies, the Jazz Bakery, the House of Blues. Any of these were sort of uses that we wanted to attract to Maryland Avenue. So the first kind of component was, as a way of jump-starting this idea, is the GATE program, which I know you're very familiar with. Ms. Fartanian's helped spearhead. This was very much focused on Maryland because, one, we had the vacancies there, but two, we're very interested in using GATE as a way of redefining this area as an arts district and not simply as the Circuit City and Borders district. So GATE was very much kind of part of that kind of way of rethinking what Maryland could be as a kind of experimental program. Next. Another piece of this at the northern end is a kind of connection to the north end of Maryland to the Alex Theater, was the idea of trying to bring an entertainment anchor to connect Maryland with the Alex Theater. This is tied into the Alex Theater expansion project. As you may know, the current proposal is for a mixed-use building at that site, which is currently the parking lot, that would include a Lemley Art House movie theater. This project was tied up with the redevelopment agency. It's basically in limbo at this point until the actions of the redevelopment agency and the unwinding of that at a state level get resolved. But this is the current proposal for that site. It also included 44 units of housing above it and the relocation of the Panda Inn restaurant on the ground floor. Next. Another one that was sort of kind of inspiring is that a new operator came in to take over the Man 10 theaters. This is the movie theater on the street level at the north end of the block. It's being under construction right now, being recast as the 5-star cinema with local architects Al-Jaji and Marcusi heading up the design of this. This is being renovated to be the sort of luxury style cinema experience that you would get, say, at the Gold Star or Gold Class Cinema in Pasadena or the ArcLight in Hollywood, a place where you can make reservations. You have big plush seats. You can order dinner brought into the movie theater. It's a very high-end experience. Obviously, ticket prices would be commensurate with that. I know they were planning on opening for the James Bond movie. I don't think they're going to make it. That opens on November 7th. So, they had an ambitious schedule, but hopefully they'll be open relatively soon. They're under construction now.
For the next James Bond movie.
Maybe for next James Bond, indeed. This project, which is also under construction, this is the Broadway Lofts project where Circuit City used to be. While this isn't inherently a sort of entertainment or arts use, a big part of this project involved rethinking what the old big box retailer sites could be. I have to say, when we developed this idea, it didn't occur to me, I didn't really think it possible that somebody would buy Circuit City property, demolish the building, and build a mixed-use building on that site, although it's proven to be a very good site for that kind of purpose. Really, I thought the Circuit City would be, somebody would buy it, repurpose it, and just put like the House of Blues or Lucky Strike lanes into it. I thought, well, that would be the perfect use of that old building. Instead, the first inaugural project of this is demolish that building and start over. So you could see the status of that construction site for yourself, just drive down the street. But it looks like they'll be opening next year. Cindy has mentioned this project a couple of times today, and I know in past meetings, to redefine the library as the cultural center at the south end. So if we have the Alex Theater, the north end, the library be the anchor at the south end. A big part of that project involves relocating the front door of the library. Right now, as you know, the front door of the library faces east towards the current parking lot. If you look south on Maryland, which is the view on the bottom, you basically see the side of the building, and if you know it's there, it's the stairs to the staff entrance into the basement. A big driving idea behind the renovation project is to do something similar to the image at the top, which is to make a giant plaza with a set of stairs that takes you up into the main reading room and sort of redefine what the front entrance of the library is. That also gives the library a lot better visibility to Brand Boulevard and the Americana. So that we think is really critical to sort of repositioning the library as this kind of cultural center. And then at the south end, next to the Americana, is the gateway created by the Museum of Neon Art. This would be directly across from Coffee Bean and Tea Leaf on Brand Boulevard. Caruso Avenue, where the chandelier hangs, would actually extend through that block. That's the passageway on the right-hand side, so we demolish one of the buildings, build a new passageway, so from the Americana you'll be able to walk directly across the street through this passageway by the museum and into the Central Park to connect to the Adult Recreation Center and to the Central Library. The Museum of Neon Art is an obligation that we are required to fund in the unwinding of redevelopment, and as you may have read in the paper, the successor agency recently approved moving forward with this project, and I think actually next week we are going to the council and asking them to authorize us to go out to bids to build this project. So hopefully this will move forward relatively soon. The status of the ultimate design of the plaza, this is what it looks like, and the kind of parking lot behind it is still somewhat in limbo. That was being funded through bond measures from the redevelopment agency. Right now the state hasn't quite released their hands on that money. We expect that they will, and that we will probably move forward with this project next year. All of these projects that involve redevelopment money basically all got delayed by about 18 months given the state's actions as it relates to redevelopment. But this would be the passageway you would walk through adjacent to the Museum of Neon Art. You can see there's this kind of fun little architectural joke. We have a kind of very thin fountain in the middle of that plaza. It's fed by the Clayton Plumbers sign, which is one of the pieces in the museum's collection, a big neon sign with dripping neon water, feeds the fountain, and then the diver on the building is jumping into it. So we thought that was kind of funny. So all totaled in this Maryland Off-Broadway, Maryland Art and Entertainment District, we've seen a lot of activity and a lot of interest in this area since we kind of initiated this set of policies. I think kind of back of the envelope calculation, we're figuring there's somewhere on the order of about $15 million worth of public money being invested in this, whether it's the money for the library, the money we're putting into the passage and the museum, some limited subsidies and kind of incentives we gave to some of the early kind of pioneering projects. But if you consider the amount of money that's been invested in terms of new restaurants, and certainly Broadway Lofts alone at $30 million, we've more than doubled the amount of money we've committed into this project in terms of private investment. So from that standpoint, we think it's been financially successful, I would say. And also, I think from the standpoint of simply reinvigorating the place, Maryland Avenue, and bringing new activities and new uses there, I think it's been pretty successful as well, and hopefully it will continue to be more successful. I think that's my final slide.
Well, thank you so much for waiting. Any comments or questions?
Very short comment. Mr. Loomis, first of all, I thank you for this great, really excellent presentation.
Thank you.
And also, I can see that we've come a very, very long way from where we were several years ago. And unfortunately, we are a government and we have a specific pace to move forward. But still, this is a great improvement on what, when we very first day we met at the DSP meeting, as you mentioned, it is a lot of improvement, a lot of addition of what really we would have liked to see then. And I just wish you all the best, and I hope that we can move forward with this and have added a lot more, and also add maybe parts of Orange Street and the Glendale Center Theater and all that into this hopefully future district. But overall, I congratulate all your work and all the hard work that the Planning Commission and all the other city departments have put into this. This is a very long way from where we started. And if somebody doesn't really see what the planning and the Planning Commission or the Arts and Culture Commission are doing, this is the best example of how far we have come. And it's just excellent. I really congratulate you for this. And your department, of course.
Commissioner Deaver?
Really great. Thank you so much for bringing this here. I actually just had a couple quick questions. Does the city own any property in the district, or is it all privately held?
We own the two parking structures, and so in the exchange structure, the ground floor tenants, like where the coffee shop is and a few other small retailers, those are tenants of the city.
Okay.
Other than parking lot where the Lemley project is proposed to go, and obviously the Central Park block where the library and the ARC is, and own other properties. So
Sure.
Borders, the marketplace, that's all privately held.
The other quick question, you mentioned that I'm not terribly surprised that nobody's taken advantage of the density bonus for the art spaces. Are you finding people taking advantage of the density bonuses for other purposes, or is it something that could...
Yes, to date, the most commonly used incentive is the public open space. And based on the council discussion last week regarding that, we'll probably be revisiting that set of standards sometime in the future. The hotel incentive has been used, although there were two projects that used a hotel incentive, although neither one of those started construction. And there was an incentive for signature design that was really reserved for high-rise buildings. There were two projects that took advantage of that, although, of course, nobody's building high-rises.
Just for future consideration for agenda discussion items, I would be curious to know if there is input that we as a commission can provide that can help when there are incentives like that aren't being taken advantage of, understanding, if there's things that we as a commission can do or as a city can do that would make it more interesting or viable for developers, whether it's providing programmers of gallery space or lists of folks that can help with that process to help encourage it in some way, whatever it might be. But just as an agenda item, I'd be curious to be able to talk about that, and then also just other types of cultural incentives that might be out there that you all might have thought of and thrown out, or maybe hasn't come to the table, just as a discussion item for us to explore things that are happening so that we can work with you in any areas that you feel that you might have some gaps that we can be useful. But thank you. I'm really, really pleased to see this and have it in such a great presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Loomis. Any other?
One thing I remember, we discussed at that level years back that if a developer has a gallery space with the incentive of an additional or one or two floors, we also discussed that the additional gallery or arts-related space would be rented out to with some rent incentives and some concessions. Is that part of it, or it's not?
Yeah,
so the developer can ask market rate basically for a space that they got somewhat for free, except, of course, for the structural and construction costs.
Yes, except that, as I mentioned, the developer who's getting that additional bonus for providing the gallery space does have to submit a business plan about how they're going to operate that space as an arts use or a gallery, including programming and ongoing events. for at least a 5-year period.
But do we have also some kind of a plan to direct the developers to arts and arts groups, or it's up to the developer to find?
It would be up to the developer. I think when we wrote this, the anticipation was that a developer might come in with a pre-established relationship with an arts group that they'd like to bring to Glendale, or a small museum, or some other kind of arts-related use that they might want to bring in and have as their anchor tenant in lieu of doing retail.
Wouldn't that put an additional burden on the developer to go out and try to look for, organizations like that? And maybe we should kind of either put more teeth to it, or kind of assist the developer to find, or have some kind of a plan where it wouldn't be a huge burden for the developer, so that they will take more of this opportunity than what they have done so far.
I think that probably gets to Commissioner Deaver's sort of suggestion that the commission maybe can play a role to kind of identify those operators that could manage a space like this.
Yes, but then the planning department should kind of have a list or some kind of a groups or whatever to direct the developers to this list or to these groups to try to select a business.
I think not, to be honest. There are other incentives available. There are incentives related to operating a hotel, but we certainly don't tell developers, we'd really like you to go meet with a hotel operator such and such. Same with affordable housing. You could provide affordable housing, and then you have to enter into a complicated affordable housing agreement about maintaining certain units as affordable housing over a certain period of time. If a developer comes to us and says we're interested in taking advantage of that incentive, we'd certainly be happy to sort of talk through the issues. But up front to sort of say, we'd like you to take advantage of our heightened density bonuses and we're going to smooth the way for you, I don't think is really appropriate. Developers don't have to use these incentives. They can build at less density and not have to go through this process. This is a process to enable developers to make more money doing their projects in exchange for some minimum public benefits. And so from our standpoint in planning, to sort of come up with a long list of operators that we think you should go talk to, it's not really a zoning function, that's about the operations of a building.
I believe the second phase of it is already in place. That means, since nothing is being suggested, but when the developer decides on whatever artwork they do, they need to come to the commission, to the Art and Culture Commission, and they need to get the approval or the kind of advisement that we would have.
Yes, that's
in place.
That would be in the case if the developer is choosing to do their public art obligation on site rather than paying the in lieu fee that goes to the Urban Art Fund. The art incentive for an art gallery is something completely different. In that case, they would go to the council, and it would be a negotiated development agreement, much like the council would negotiate an agreement to give somebody additional heightened density for operating a certain, like a business class hotel. And then there's expectations that in exchange for being able to build taller, you're going to operate this building as a business class hotel for a certain number of years. It's almost like a contractual arrangement executed through a development agreement. This would be a similar kind of arrangement should somebody wish to use the art gallery incentive. It would be, I think the case where it would be used would be if somebody had an existing operator or a kind of existing museum that they were willing to sort of pluck out of another community or was trying to get established, they would come in with a business plan about how that business would operate, that gallery would operate.
Well, in case of art gallery or any kind of entertainment center, still, are they going to make a decision on their own, or is it going to come to any kind of advisory form, which would kind of decide if that would be appropriate for the city or it would be in demand for the city?
If a developer chose to use the art gallery incentive to get additional heightened density, that would probably go to the Planning Commission and then to the City Council, in which case they'd be reviewing simply the terms of that agreement. Right now, there isn't any obligation that they would come to the Arts Commission.
They would come to the commission if it's the on-site art requirement. So it's two different things. So if a developer came in and said, the 2% requirement we have, and rather than commissioning a sculpture, we want to have a gallery space, that would come before the commission because that's a development standard. But with the incentive, because that's an actual, it's development, it requires a development agreement, that would be the business or the developer's decision. So when it's on-site art, that would come to the commission for review if they choose to do that.
So if the developer comes to you and says, I want to take this opportunity, but I don't have anybody, how would you react to it?
It would be hard for them to submit a 5-year business plan if they don't have anybody in place. So I don't think they would pass the muster, and they probably would not get the incentive.
And the planning department would not refer them to certain potential waiting list people, or people who would like to come to
If there were
Glendale?
people, if we knew there were arts uses in town that had an interest in setting up and could actually function as an operator, I think, yeah, we'd probably say, well, why don't you go talk to so-and-so, and they might be willing to run the space for you. We know that, for example, that the Alex Theater has an interest in a black box 99-seat theater. So if somebody said, I'm interested in taking advantage of this incentive, we might suggest, why don't you talk to the Alex Theater and see whether you can strike a deal with them. They would operate a theater on your behalf, and they would be the operator, but you as a developer would get the density bonus associated with that. So that might be one example.
To me, somehow, any kind of entertainment or any kind of anything presented as, even if it's a long-term gallery or whatever it is, or a comedy club or whatever they decide.
Or dance school, let's say.
Or dance school or et cetera. It is a component that has to do with the art and culture. And I would be surprised if that would not be kind of either reviewed or discussed. Forget about us here. That's for any city. If they have an art and culture commission, I would be surprised if either the department or the developer or whatever it is, the art and culture commission would not be in the mix. Because I would believe that should be a component.
Well, I don't disagree with you, other than to say the way the legislation is written right now, the Arts Commission doesn't have a role in reviewing those proposals. As I said, nobody's taken advantage of this. Nobody's even sniffed at it. So it's been on the books for 3 years, and we haven't seen anybody even think of using it. They go to other incentives if they choose to use incentives.
So to get it to be sniffed, should it be the part of the council? Should it come from the council? How would that be put into the idea that is naturally, I think, that's the component, that's part of what needs to be done?
Again, I think if a developer was interested in developing, a private developer had acquired a piece of property and was looking at developing the maximum value using the height and density bonuses, usually what ends up happening at the planning level is we do have a discussion with them, what makes the most sense for you? And at that time, we might suggest, we always suggest an art gallery is one component, but it does come with obligations. And if it's a developer who has no relationship to the arts community, usually they're not that interested in developing a relationship. This incentive is really geared towards the developers that already have some sort of relationship with the arts community, maybe, support a board they're on the board of a small local museum of some kind, so.
It's a unique developer that is
Exactly.
interested in that type of thing. And that goes back to my thing about having an agenda item where we can discuss these kinds of things, I think, amongst ourselves and with some input from staff about, where we might be able to make some improvements. But just a quick question. You had mentioned that the open space element was going back to council. I might be getting my terms right, but the bonus for if they provide public space or open space that was being
Yes, the last 2 projects that the City Council approved both used the open space incentive, and it generated a great deal of discussion on the council, and there was some interest from at least 2 of the council members in revisiting the requirements of that open space incentive in exchange vis-a-vis what we allow give as a density bonus. So at some point in the future, I expect that we'll be exploring that topic with the Planning Commission and with the City Council.
I would be interested as a commission knowing when that's coming up, because my curiosity, if there was a place where somehow the art space and the open space component, I don't know what their issues or concerns are, what exactly is being discussed, but in my mind I see that there might be opportunity to talk about public use of space as part of the private commercial space that they would be programming as an art gallery, for instance, but making something that's more public, quasi-public, private, as part of the public use component?
Yes, the one project of the two projects that have actually elected to do on-site art, one of them is at 300 North Central. That project will probably start construction relatively soon. They use the public open space bonus, and it's kind of a semi-enclosed public-private space, and their art component, the commissioner will maybe recall, is a sort of LED neon light sculpture that hangs, a chandelier type thing that hangs in the ceiling over that bonus space. So there is a kind of intimate relationship between the public space and the public art. That's actually one of the kind of criteria.
Yeah, to the extent that we can be, just in case we miss it somehow coming up and be aware of it, because I just think that it'd be nice if we could have, again, as part of that agenda item, this sort of a discussion about how something could be better merged in that way, where space maybe could be used for a gallery rather than the installation, and encouraged between these two types of incentives that might help bolster somebody taking advantage of the art incentive in some way. It's generalized, but I just think there might be some conversation in there worth having.
We can certainly discuss that when we revisit this topic with the council, explore some ideas. I want to sort of say two other things. One, I sort of slightly misspoke. The art gallery incentive does not apply to the theaters, because theaters generate a totally different kind of, traffic demand, if you will, kind of seating in terms of pedestrians. So it's purely towards exhibit space, museums or art galleries. And then two, I think it's very appropriate to acknowledge your staff liaison, Ms. Vartanian, who is the project manager for the Maryland Art and Entertainment District. I just did the pretty renderings. She did all the work.
Thank you.
Okay. I think we can move on to the next item. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Next item, please.
Item 6, commission staff comments.
There better not be any. No.
I just have an announcement. I have promised this artist. Today at the 7 o'clock at the St. Leon Armenian Cathedral on Glen Oaks Boulevard, 3300 block, just across from the Woodbury University, a local artist, prominent artist, a very good artist by the name of Susan Sevo is having an exhibition and book dedication. I have seen her work, and she also has asked me to make a presentation of her in the event. So I'm going to speak in there also after all this today. And she is a great artist and very interesting style. And I am inviting on her behalf all the community and all the commissioners and everybody who is interested to attend this event and enjoy the artwork, the book that she has published, and the whole event. So today at 7 p.m. Actually, the actual and this is under the auspices of the Archbishop Hovnan Derderian, who is the prominent leader of the Armenian Church, Apostolic Church on the Western region, and the all the community members are invited. Again, St. Leon Armenian Cathedral on I believe it's 3325. Glen Oaks Boulevard in Burbank, just across from Woodbury University. The event starts around 7. There will be a mixer and refreshments, and the actual program will start at 8 o'clock. Thank you.
I don't think there are any more comments, so next item, please.
Item 7, written communications.
I don't have any, so next item is adjournment. We are adjourned.